you know what? I've just gone ahead and hit the button. I just at this point. So, well, hopefully greet the audience here. Terribly backlit hog tie, but oh my goodness. So what's gone on here? And we're gonna hopefully wait for people to get some announcements out on various forms of social media, especially putting announcements in the live chat of our now dead video. So we had set up a hangout ahead of time and shared the link and said, oh great, people can come, people can watch. Oh, it'll be really interesting. And it turns out, for some reason, if you start a hangout but then don't actually hit the start button within a particular time limit, then that one just croaks and you simply can't start it. So the advice I was given fairly consistently from the group was you have to just kill off the old hangout, start a new one. So we've all migrated over here. I've not yet opened the, I like to open the live chat and a little pop-out thing here. So let's do that. And then we'll start welcoming people. So there is the pop-out chat. Whoops. Oh, look what I did.
Good.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. Like, really? Did I just do that? I'm having like a DPR.
I found that one of the biggest memory drains in Hangouts is the live chat. When I scroll through it, everything starts clipping.
Oh, really? No, I've not had that problem, but okay, I think that's the link to the pop-out chat. But here we are. Welcome, folks. So just to get you caught up on the day's events. So first on the GTV channel, which is I should have turned off my camera for this G-Man Science channel. That's G-Man Science channel is kind of like True Empiricism having a not drama channel. He had a debate which was scheduled and planned. People did preparation for it. Dragnauct versus G-Man. I understand that it was in part to sort of get some of these issues and for people to discuss things in a non-shouty way. Also in large and important part for some charity, which I think Dragnauct will speak about first before we get too carried away with our discussion of it. But this had happened, I guess, started about 3 hours ago. Christopher Maudy had stepped in to do some moderation, and I think it went very well. Everybody was polite and civil, and I think that they feel they got their points out. There may be some discussion about whether questions that were asked were aptly answered, but we'll get to that. Following that, Steve McRae put up, hosted a hangout, which is part one to this hangout, really, where it was just sort of some discussion of what was going on in that hangout. I think in this hangout, which will be part two to Steve's, we'll end up touching on some of the same issues and even presenting some of the same things just to sort of help bridge people in. We'll be careful to make sure to talk about some other things that didn't get touched on in Steve's thing. Also at the same time, True Empiricism on either the True Empiricism channel, the True Talk TV channel, has opened a Bring It Evolutionists thing, which whatever, those things are pointless because anyone who has shown True Empiricism evidence of the things that he claims to be asking for evidence for is just perma-banned, so there's no point in going to them. Plus, he's now has it open at a time when, you know, we could be doing kind of a debate and having some sort of after-show discussion, but he's sort of disinvited himself and disinvited G-Man from any sort of discussion about what's going on there. So anyway, so those are your choice. Those are the four things that have happened today. The debate, Steve's part one to this thing. This is part two to Steve's thing, and then of course Bring It Evolutionists is going on. I want to welcome DPR Jones, who again one of his rare moments. He is on release on conditions, presumably wearing some sort of an ankle device to allow him to broadcast to us from his home. Dragnauct is here, a battle-weary Dragnauct. Druss is here. Fiona, also Druss and Fiona from the UK, joining us at, I think, a comfortable evening time. Hannah, who I understand has watched a lot of this stuff, but I think this is her first chance to kind of pop in and speak up, although I guess you spoke a little bit at Steve's thing.
This is probably my first real chance, because before I just wanted to make a quick comment.
All right, well, make sure you have a good chance. Jade is here.
Druss, we're live.
Druss's camera popped on. Jade's here, who I know feverishly had been doing some searching and posting of stuff. We're gonna have lots of little corrections to make. Who's this new Midnight? Oh, Midnight Sparkles, good. Yeah, and of course Pseudo's here. Just in case there's any concern, someone might be able to finish a sentence. Who wants first?
Hogtie, that would imply that if I ever actually start a sentence myself.
Yeah. So who wants in? Who? I guess where do we start? Do you want to do? Yeah, Drag, you're here. Why did we do this? Let's start with that. Why did we do this?
So basically, my dear son, remember I told you about my son who likes to sneak in at the most inopportune times and go up under my desk and mess with me? He's doing it now, and he thinks it's funny. Get the hell out. So one of the main reasons I did this, I knew G-Man wasn't going to absorb everything that I said. he didn't absorb everything that most of us said when we were with him in person. So this would be a far-fetched expectation for him to do it now. Am I coming through clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now
Awesome.
you were into the beginning. Now you are.
Okay. This was mainly because I wanted to use this as kind of a springboard for some larger topics, because I identified in the title that this whole premise of what constitutes something as being scientific is more of a philosophical question. It's more the philosophy of science, rather than, well, this is just a claim, this particular postulate is unsubstantiated. And there's a difference in there. And so I could not broach that topic with G-Man and have him understand it, so I had to tackle it from the best angle that I saw, and I've been getting some really good feedback on that. But more to why I was doing this, one of my main motivations is that I am big on doing charities for people who have suffered from natural disasters. As a victim of Hurricane Katrina, I have firsthand experience as to what can happen psychologically, from losing everything that you have. So just recently with Hurricane Harvey and now Hurricane Irma, people have lost everything. So G-Man allowed me to donate some of my questions for charity. And the first few questions that I asked came from people who donated to that via GoFundMe, and I really appreciate that. Another one was that I do have a diagnosed anxiety disorder, along with PTSD and all the other, classic mental disorders that afflict many veterans. So I wanted to also show that if you do have a mental illness of some type, don't let that, or don't think that that precludes you from being able to do things in life, like public speaking, like teaching, like anything else that anybody else does. So I did add that in at the end because I thought that was important, because there are a lot of people who are on this particular medium because they have issues interacting with people in person, and they find it very intimidating to be in a classroom full of people. And I can tell you that even though I typically know what the fuck I'm talking about, having people look at me, I take it still as being hostile. And so immediately my blood just begins to boil. And so to help with that, I put myself in, I guess, would be precarious situations to get used to engaging others in a vigorous yet edifying discussion.
Well, I do want to say a bit of feedback. I do think it was a good discussion in the sense of it's nice to see where people can calm down, because some of these hangouts are kind of shouty, and I think it's kind of nice to see, well, we'll sit down and let me take 20 minutes to trot out my argument, and then I'm going to listen to you for 20 minutes. And now that was a nice change. I mean, I think it's sort of for good or bad, because what it ended up revealing is that without the excuse that G-Man often offers, without the excuse of, well, people are over talking me, people are muting me, et cetera, to say, okay, we're going to sit back, we're going to listen to you talk for 20 minutes. What we ended up getting was G-Man in the raw, like his actual justification for his positions. He was able to state his position clearly, namely that the whole science around macroevolution is a fraud. It's not real science. It's all based on these scientific frauds. And here's my evidence for it. And I went and I sought out my best evidence for it. It turns out it's going to be an article from a satirical website and a YouTube search without even looking at the videos. So I mean, it was good in the way that we got to sort of put our evidence, the participants, to try to provide some justification for their positions. I think it was nice to see that people were really calm about it. But I think at the end of the process, it just sort of shows sort of how people come to believe what's true and what's not. I'm going to encourage people to toss some topics in the side chat. There's lots of little neat, fun things that happen in that discussion. I want to make sure that if you think of something that you had wanted to say on air, make sure to type it in the side chat, and I'll keep an eye on it so we make sure to come back to it. Who wants to jump in now? I know Hannah hasn't said much.
I just wanted
to
kick
watch
off
the other
if I
hangout.
may. Just for those,
go ahead, yeah.
For those that didn't see the debate or discussion, I have to say that I was desperately disappointed with G-Man. It's arguable, as I think Fiona has commented, that he may have tried to make some effort, but his effort was really and consisted mainly, as you say, using a satirical website for evidence of there being giants once on the earth and scientists destroying this evidence. But he then went through pretty much most of Hovine's the one we didn't discuss in the previous hangout was the second law of thermodynamics, which clearly he's got no understanding of. Scientist.
Shudder.
All of the arguments that he went through were just proven. He didn't do a particularly good job at all. He didn't provide any evidence. The only thing I can say is that he remained civil throughout, but the content that he presented, I thought was absolutely dire.
I was hoping that he would have a presentation. He said that he had some technical issues, so I was curious as to what kind of PowerPoint he would present. One of the common criticisms is that mine was a bit too technical, and that I took cues directly from Rational Mind, and so going from him to me, I kind of felt that it was sufficient and that I was communicating this in an effective manner to lay people. But after having my wife and another friend of ours who has no background in biology, they pointed out to me that it was a bit too technical for them to really understand. So I will take that criticism to heart and see that when I get the science right in whatever I'm presenting, that I cut down the content and that it is relatable as much as I can to people who are outside of that particular wheelhouse. Because honestly, I was a bit out of my depth on a few of the slides, so I tried to stay away from speaking on something like a STEM group, for instance, because Rational Mind had to kind of pull me aside a few times and say, I think you're kind of confusing this. And it had to do with, I think I was making a comparison between eutherians and, or the entire classification of monotremes. And I was separating them needlessly in my notes. And he wanted to make a correction on that. So, so yeah, it is, there needs to be a certain requisite level of knowledge to understand my presentation, and I think that probably took away from a lot of people understanding it.
I don't think the level was really misplaced. I mean, this is one of the weird things about when you go to discuss science, and people have heard this phrase has been often misattributed to Einstein, but make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. I mean, I guess I know that sometimes. G-Man had put up a video a while ago that, going by the title, it said something along the lines of, evolutionists make things complicated, or they just can't answer a simple question, or something along those lines. What do you do when a topic itself is kind of complicated, or maybe you can understand it, but when somebody asks you for the evidence itself is complicated? I mean, the one thing I bring up quite often is the whole speed of light thing. They say it's constant in all reference frames, and yet if you're in a moving reference frame relative to something else, then you experience time and distance differently, or you would perceive time and difference differently in their reference frame. I mean, these are complicated issues, and if somebody tries to explain it, or just atomic theory, right, about the fact that the electrons don't orbit like this and then increase their orbit. Now they're orbiting out here. They sort of just pop, and they're actually waves, or they're whatever. These are complicated things, and it's not a criticism of any scientific field to say, well, this is difficult to explain, or there's some background knowledge that you need to have here. It's not a criticism of that scientific field in the sense of, well, then it must be wrong. I mean, that whole atom thing is so complicated, it must be wrong. When asked for evidence of what justifies your belief in common ancestry, if your answer is anything more than, well, I just have faith, then it's going to be something complicated, because the justification for believing in common ancestry is based on the convergence of a lot of different lines of evidence. So if you're going to present the actual model, the view, and especially if you're going to present evidence, of course it's going to be a little bit complicated. I don't think yours was at a too high of a level. I think it was arguably too high of a level for your target audience.
I think it was at too high a level for G-Man to understand.
Yeah, that's what I was wrapping up.
That's the problem. And someone
but is that a
posted in the
goal?
comment, can you talk at G-Man's level when it comes to science? I kind of think you can't dumb down. You're basically going to have to start educating him from scratch, because he clearly knows virtually nothing about science in general and evolution in particular. And I don't claim to have that knowledge, but I don't know how basic you could make it without effectively starting him off again at primary school, or maybe not primary school, but you know what I mean.
I want to echo
And
that,
I'll
but
start from scratch.
yeah, I want to echo it, but I want to sort of put a slightly different spin on it. I don't want to feed too much into the whole G-Man is stupid thing, and we're hearing that an awful lot. And I mean, I would think he on occasion has difficulty learning new material. It has to be presented to him in a particular way. He has to be attentive to it. You know, we all learn different amounts of material at different rates, and I don't fault G-Man for any sort of an impairment in terms of being able to learn new material. He has demonstrated that he can learn new material with the right approach and the right focus. He certainly can learn new stuff. Where in this case, where he really stumbles is in the insistent resistance to take on certain types of information, right? As soon as you try to tell him that, well, this is my view, like the whole, I mean, good Lord, he's in this debate, he's prepared for this debate, and he said, oh, so do you believe that dinosaurs can turn into non-dinosaurs? I've lost count of how many times we've explained that very simple issue. There's some complicated things, that's not one of them. Dogs don't turn into non-dogs. And he still can't seem to get that. So he's intentionally resistant. It's the same way he asks about, oh, so how can you say that people are fish and not fish at the same time? Okay, well, how many times has that been explained to him? It's not stupidity. I mean, I'm not taking a position on whether or not he's stupid. I'm saying that even if he weren't stupid, he would still be stupid on this topic because it is an important plank in his faith that he can't accept that what scientists are saying on these issues is true, if you follow.
I mean, I just. Oh, go ahead, Dreg.
I was going to say, yeah, it has a lot to do with what he chooses to believe, because even when you explain to him, G-Man, what you're saying, when you say eukaryote, what you're describing is more than likely a paramecium, which paramecium is a eukaryote. But then when you say that we're not a eukaryote, that statement on its face is wrong. But if you're identifying the word or the label or whatever with its actual content or context, then that's when he starts to run into issues, because you can't tell him that he doesn't understand what something means. Like, you cannot, there's no way to communicate to G-Man, no, you have the wrong concept of this, because that is in his mind making fun of him. So he then goes, well, your correction of me is an ad hominem, and if it's not an ad hominem, then you're just being tricky with words. And if you're not being tricky with words, then you're just being dishonest. So there is no point in that where he goes, maybe this topic that I have no formal education or informal education in, maybe I don't know it as well as I think I know it.
Yeah,
there's no self-reflection.
Could you imagine having your middle school math teacher point out a mistake you've made, where you've pointed out something simple like that -4 times -4 equals -16, and the teacher tries to correct you on that and explain to you the rationale why it would have to be +16, but in attempting to hear that message, you know that your middle school math teacher is an evil, dirty, disgusting person who is trying to deceive you and hates you for your beliefs and is trying to break your faith. And everything that this person says to you is just to destroy your faith. Like, how would you ever possibly learn even some of the most basic things about algebra? I know Hannah and was it Dresser, Jade had a thing that they wanted to say, but I do need to interrupt real quick. I understand that apparently, so True Empiricism has been hosting a hangout, but he has he's been sniped, is what I'm hearing. Just for see something in the live chat. Yeah, it's not cool. You know what? You can encourage. I mean, he'll probably just start a new hangout. I don't think they'll join here. They're welcome to join here. They have my promise on. We'll firm up the moderation. I mean, I kind of want to talk about these issues. Actually, before I let Hannah and Jade, I think, had something to say, but I got bursting with this thing because this has been bothering me for so long. Why can we not just sit down and talk about these issues? I want to do a hangout on falsifiability, on what it means for a theory to be falsified, what it would mean for a theory to be falsified. Give some examples of falsifiable theories that have not been falsified. I want to talk about these things, but I can't go into a True Empiricism hosted hangout and have that discussion. I can't go into a G-Man discussion and have that kind of a, and I can't have them come in and say, well, let's talk about this stuff. They ask us repeatedly for evidence, which shows the evidence, show us the evidence. The question they're asking, I think, is a great one. I want to host a Bring It Evolutionists. Explain to me, you give me your justification for your belief in common ancestry. Heck, come in and give me your justification for your belief in a spherical Earth. I think most people believe in a spherical Earth without sound firsthand justification for it. These are interesting topics, but they won't participate. But please, he got sniped. They're welcome to come over here. Someone please. I've been invited by both of those guys not to message them, so I won't do it. But they're welcome to come on over. I promise we'll do strict and fair moderation. There'll be no personal attacks and that sort of thing. And I'm
just bring something up here that I think is important.
Sorry.
I just want to bring this up. Right. Okay. This sniping issue is getting really silly.
Oh,
okay?
right. Yeah.
But there's another issue that is driving me absolutely nuts, and I just want to bring it up now. We have got people turning up in live chats using impersonation accounts, and it's causing absolute havoc in live chats. Because those who want to actually have a discussion in a live chat, they're not in the Hangout, but they want to talk in the live chat, and they can't because the impersonation accounts are continually spamming the chat.
Yeah, you know what? I don't mind a bit of chicanery, especially when it's funny. If you want to do a Poe channel, then be a Poe. I mean, you know, you might get caught, you might not, but whatever. I mean, that stuff's funny. But when you're impersonating, that's not cool. It disrupts the conversation. And what do you think you're achieving? You think you're achieving something by making by the way, I'm not talking about the True Empiricism account, which is
an obvious, you know, parody of his list. But not that one.
But when you're making like a phony Mr. Campbell account or a phony Mr. G-Man account, what is your goal? Is it to make it so that there's on the screen the words G-Man and then something stupid? Because mission accomplished, right? I mean, if you watch the last live chat on the actual video that was on the GTV channel, the G-Man, GTV was the hosting channel for that debate, you've got True Empiricism asking Fiona a question, Fiona answering the question, and then True Empiricism scolding Fiona for not answering the question. And then him refusing to answer her question while he's scolding her for not answering his. And then me asking him, because I'm curious about this, and we'll get to this point too, about even though Steve touched on it, we got to talk about it here too. The giants, the Smithsonian destroying the skeletons of giants. And I mean, Ronnie, True Empiricism is in that live chat saying, oh boy, Dragnaught's really embarrassing himself. This is so embarrassing for Dragnaught. And yet he can't for 1 second record. So I thought, well, maybe it's because True Empiricism believes in the whole giants thing. Well, I don't want to assume that. I don't want to assume that. I'm just going to ask him. So I ask him a simple yes/no question. Do you believe that the Smithsonian was destroying these things? Do you think that that's actually a true story? He can't answer. It doesn't matter how many times I typed it. Other people were typing it. He simply can't answer that question. But he's scolding other people for not answering questions, even though they are answering questions. So,
and he's recording it all.
And oh yeah, that's right. That was the thing I was going to say. If your goal is to have on the screen True Empiricism followed by something stupid, that mission accomplished, because he's in there typing, oh, I'm recording this. I'm going to make a video about this. I'm recording this. You're recording yourself not answering a question while you're scolding other people for not answering questions when they are answering questions, and you're recording yourself saying that you're recording everything, and you're going to make a video showing how everybody else is an idiot. You don't need to make spoof accounts and impersonate people. It's just not funny, and it's not helpful.
Can I just jump in here?
And it picks up the flow of the conversation as well.
It does.
So people don't know what's been going on. You can't see the progression.
Yeah, if you think you're helping us, you're not. It makes it harder for us to do what we're trying to do. But I know Hannah's sort of chomping at the bit here.
Yeah, there was something earlier I wanted to mention with G-Man, but it slipped my mind. It'll probably come back to me later. But as far as inviting them to join this hangout and have a conversation, I think it's well within reason that we can have that conversation with G-Man. Maybe not now, considering that True Empiricism has really riled him up and gotten the G-Man persona out. He's like very bombastic at the moment. But in an ordinary setting where that didn't happen, yeah, I would love to talk to him about common ancestry. There's certain things I don't know about evolution that I know when we hang out, he asks me, and I always defer to, Sam, Fiona, Drag, somebody who actually has education in that, definitely not someone like me. But when we're saying we want to invite someone like True Empiricism, that's where I don't think there can be any progress, because he's the type of person to do exactly what he was doing in the debate live chat. Pose a question, the question gets answered, and then he just claims that he's victorious because somehow someone didn't answer it, or it was a gotcha question, or he'll delete the comment, or he's deleted comments, he's dishonestly edited videos to show someone saying one thing out of context.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's any purpose in talking with Ronnie, considering that he's in G-Man's hangout right now. defending a satirical article, not G-Man satirical, he's in his own hangout defending G-Man's use of a satirical article that anybody with eyes can just scroll down and read clearly the disclaimer that it's satirical.
So I'm going to make a little prediction here. I can talk to G-Man like on my phone because he and I have been talking the last few days, just chatting. He's been talking to my wife. Everything's been fine. You know, when he gets around true empiricism, you have to think about something. We know that G-Man kind of ups the ante when it comes to his persona, and he's a little bit more rambunctious, but he can control himself. Ronnie is on here to be a character. He's on here for an express purpose of trying to entice people to elevate him to the status of being credible. Ronnie is in no way, shape, or form equipped to have any of these discussions at any point in time, and I have no problem saying that. He knows dick all about any of this. But I will engage G-Man because he makes an effort to offer the olive branch, even though it's half whittled and broken. He'll offer it at some point. Ronnie does not do that. And I will take my time, and people wondering why I engage G-Man is because G-Man did humble himself and say, I will have this, and let's make some terms, and let's do that. Ronnie has not done that for anybody, and that's why I don't think that he's worthy enough to even have a debate with, or just even a civil discussion, because I have offered him on a number of occasions to just have a one-on-one between he and I on my channel. I know he won't do it. And G-Man will and has on multiple occasions. So I try not to pay attention to the G-Man antics when he gets around his buddies, because I know how peer pressure can be, and I think he is just a little more susceptible to peer pressure than your average 40-year-old man. So I'm not saying excuse G-Man's behavior, but just kind of keep that in mind, because you have someone whose malicious intent kind of permeates in the room, and then everyone else kind of feeds off of that.
I just want to drop in.
You're right. They really don't check each other in that regard. Yeah, Dress, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to drop in something very quickly. I want to actually apologise very formally, which is why I put my camera on, and as everyone knows, I very rarely ever do it. Yeah, just so you can see my face, G-Man. I'm sorry, I should not have called you an idiot. I should have actually taken the time to explain the difference between paleontology and archaeology. And I will say that. I'm sorry. That was wrong. That's me.
But I would actually, Drag, just to bounce off of your comment, I would take it a step further. He's not just playing a character. I do have a belief at this point in time, given his behavior, that he's there purposely to entice other theists to rile up against the quote-unquote atheist community. Because there's something about not being able to recognize when your own side, people on your own camp, are doing something that's detrimental to the overall cause. Like if Ronnie were paying attention, he'd say, "Listen, G-Man, the point that you're trying to make is good. Just don't use this article, right? This is an article that they're just going to use against you, and it's going to make everybody look bad. Just don't do it." Instead, he's purposely inciting G-Man to become more and more hyped and angry. So he's doing beyond what would be the normal call for someone who holds that theistic belief. He's going above and beyond. He's saying, I want G-Man to be riled up. I want him to be angry. I want him to be aggressive and call everybody stupid poo-poo heads. And so it's not worth talking to Ronnie at this point, unless he somehow shows that he has a change of character.
Well, I think that's the point I brought up before, that if you just stand there in support of what your side has said, and your side is making a dreadful argument, you're not doing them any favours. Help them to improve their arguments. And by trying to defend the use of a fictitious article as evidence doesn't do G-Man any favours. Because now he knows, courtesy of everybody else, that when you look up an article and it says something like that, check it out. Make sure it doesn't have a great big disclaimer on the bottom of the same page. I mean, that doesn't take a lot of digging. So G-Man could learn from that. But instead, we have Ronnie saying, oh, it's down to them, you did nothing wrong. That doesn't help G-Man out. I mean, what's Ronnie's goal here? To make G-Man look like a bigger fool than Ronnie? Because if that's what his goal is, then he's going the right way about it. And I don't think that G-Man is a bigger fool than Ronnie. I don't think that for a minute.
No, I don't either.
Just really quickly
and the
before I
U-
forget, a little
Sorry,
like
honey.
service announcement. Some people have brought it to my attention that they thought I was banning true empiricism off of like Dragnauct and Steve's. Like I wasn't banning the real true empiricism or the real Antonio Fletcher. Just like it was mentioned before, there are people who are impersonating those accounts.
Yes.
On my mobile, it's really easy to tell because with one tap of my thumb, I can see how many subscribers they have. So I know if it's 0 and all that. It's a Poe account. So
But
nobody
that's the
panic. I never
problem
block
because
the
when they've
real
used the
people.
same
I just
name,
block.
Hannah, when they've used the same name and you boot out the impersonation account, it comes up saying so and so timed out, and it looks as if you've actually timed out the genuine person when in actual fact you've timed out the impersonator.
Yeah,
And
Matthew
that then
Ecclesiastes
provides
thought that
them
I
with
did that.
lovely screenshots to use. And this is one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I get so annoyed with impersonation accounts.
Is Hogtight around, or did he pass up mods to anybody?
He's had to step away for a few minutes, but he's
Hold on a
listening
sec.
in.
See if just because Reggie's here, and I wanted Reggie to see this because he actually helped me with this.
No, I did the wrong thing. Hold on.
Oh no, I have mods. Look at that. Jesus. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So Reggie, you missed the main debate, man. I sent it to you. You muted. Reggie, you muted. There you go.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, 2 things muted here. Yeah, I was just looking. I was just listening to some of this. I swear, I think in my older age, I am really beginning to lose a lot more of my patience. But
I know that feeling.
what the fuck
You and
did
me
I
both.
just listened to? Oh my gosh, what was going on? I can't believe what I was just listening to. It was like, I know you guys probably already talked it. I'm late to the game, and I apologize. I thought it was this evening for some reason, but I even had it on my calendar. But when I heard the fossils, like the Smithsonian is like destroyed giant human fossils, I couldn't even see the URL, right? But I knew right away that that was just a fake site, you know. And I was like, how could you not know that that is not? Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, we got to pick up on that one. Can somebody who can do screen sharing can load that up, and I'll present you when you get it loaded up, because
I'll get it sorted for you.
we'll do it super briefly, just because I know people would have seen it during the debate and seen it during Steve's hangout, which is kind of part 1 of this. But just for people joining us a little bit later, we're going to share it, and it sort of nicely dovetails into the issue about what happens when you're doing a debate, and your demand, and a reasonable one, is for evidence. We should be talking about evidence. This was one of the points. We're going to return to our list on the side. We've been making a list in the side chat of topics we want to make sure to touch on. This is one. It's about the nature of evidence and about addressing evidence that's brought forward. I think it's a very, very reasonable request for somebody to say, look, you believe in common ancestry? Like, you believe that there's actually an ancient hominid that is a common ancestor of us. We came from the same population of critters that are also the parents of chimps and bonobo and orangutan, and if you go further back, cats and carrots. That's an incredible claim. Why do you believe that? Bring forward the evidence, and then you address that evidence. If that evidence doesn't really sit well with you, then you address the evidence that's brought forward. This would be the strategy for truth seeking, right? But what we've seen in this debate was Dragnauct came in with his evidence, and G-Man came in with his evidence, which was, well, here's all these various frauds that are going on, right? G-Man doesn't want to address the evidence that Dragnauct brings up, but instead he wants to bring evidence of frauds, and he doesn't realize what a fallacious approach to reasoning that is. So, for example, if this were a legitimate way of reasoning, what I could do is bring forward, I actually just did a search on eBay during the debate for pieces of the cross. You can buy pieces of the real cross. Now, if you buy, and they're sometimes thousands of dollars, there's little slivers of the cross. If you add up these little slivers, this cross must have been tons, because there have been so many of these things sold over the last couple thousand years. Well, then I guess there never was a cross. Jesus never died on a cross, because there are inauthentic pieces of the cross being sold. The world was supposed to end yesterday. There's a person who believes in the the divinity of Christ, who made the prediction that the world was going to end yesterday. And then he changed it to, oh, we're going to be judged, or we're going to enter tribulation, or whatever it was he changed it to. So if we're allowed to point to things that Christians say that are demonstrably wrong, and point to that as evidence that Christianity itself is wrong, that is, if we're going to apply G-Man's reasoning about how you test evolution to something like his claims of the divinity of Jesus, well, then the divinity of Jesus goes out the window. So anyway, we have G-Man bringing in this evidence of these frauds, and he doesn't realize that even if there do exist frauds, and most of the things he brought up weren't even frauds anyway, which is additionally silly, even if such things were actually frauds, that goes no distance to demonstrating that the actual scientific information somehow isn't credible, right? So, and that's to say, even if he did have examples of frauds, which I think he had one or two, like, did he mention the Piltdown Man? And that was discussed in Steve's Hangout. You guys can bring it up again a little bit later if you want, but I know other people have some things to say. But I do want to at some point touch on Lucy's knee, which there is a fraud in there. And that is, you had scientists who discovered a knee, and then a year later at a different dig site, and with a different ID number attached to it, they found the fossil later commonly called Lucy. And since then, they've also found a few hundred other portions of skulls, incomplete Australopithecine finds. So, but they say, so back in the early 80s, Tom Willis, a fairly famous creationist of the day, came up with this story that the evil scientists found the Lucy specimen, and then they found this knee somewhere else, and then they said, well, this is Lucy's knee, and they just started like cobbling together all these different things. And if you ever look at any of the Lucy, the original Lucy specimen, the recreations of the Lucy specimen, any of the hundreds of other Australopithecines we found, Lucy is actually not presented with that knee. But they say that, oh yeah, they just took this knee and they just put it in as part of the display, and that's just part of this big fraud. G-Man is 100% certain that the Lucy exhibit is something that was tampered with, that this is a fraud. And the only fraud that is there is back in the early 80s when Tom Willis created the phony story that the Lucy specimen was tampered with by inserting this other knee that was found 1.5 miles away. That's the fraud. And creationists keep repeating the fraud, that the whole Lucy find was a fraud. And this is all a way of avoiding any discussion about the fact that there are literally hundreds of Australopithecines that have been found.
There's actually a letter from Dr. Johansson on my screen, and this is a letter.
Now on everyone's screen share. Go ahead.
And this is a letter. And this is a letter he sent to Jim Lippard, who was informing him about an article that was coming up in a creationist magazine by Walter Brown, and I think this is clear testimony of his position.
Walter Brown, Walt Brown, hydroplate guy.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and it doesn't take a lot of research. I mean, this is so. We should get on to, speaking of research. Let's go ahead and show the World Net News report, whatever thing. Let's get that. Yeah, there we are. So this is. Oh no, not the Snopes one. Who's got the original?
We need the original.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I wanted to point out here while we have a chance. I've mentioned my little video before. I did a short video on this. In that video, I show a picture of the knee right next to Lucy's actual knees. And you can see that they don't match.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Actually, it's a good chance too to link Jade's video. That's a good point. So Jade makes some videos that are she calls them so-and-so minute or whatever else. They're usually more than a minute, but not that many minutes, more than a minute. And it's really nice, condensed. Look, here's something that's being discussed. Here's the truth behind it. Who's got that scratchy mic open?
Is that mine?
That is you again, yeah. For some reason, Drag, when you seem to open your mic, it tends to have like a lot of static backgroundy noise, like you're in a rainstorm or something, and then it sort of clears up. I'm not sure what's going on there. Hopefully that's something fixable by you. Now I lost my phone. Jade has these videos, so we'll put in a link for her one about the knee, because this is one of those things I saw when G-Man first started talking about Lucy. I immediately started on typing in there, oh, he's going to bring up the whole, or not Lucy, we brought up Lucy. I said, he's going to bring up the thing about the knee. He's going to bring up the thing about the knee. And I had seen other people, I wasn't the only one, I'd seen other people refer to this as a PRAT, P-R-A-T-T, something refuted. What's that stand for? Something refuted 1,000 times?
Yeah, points refuted 1,000
Points refuted 1,000 times. Yeah, I mean, how many times can we explain? And the thing about the research, if you were really interested in this issue with Lucy's knee, you could very easily look it up. There are many different places if you want to find the story of Lucy's knee and learn that it was actually just a complete lie created by Tom Willis, that you could look into it and find out, well, this is not a good argument. And you could also realize the scientists aren't arguing from Lucy's knee, that there's a whole set of specimens that were found. And you could look into these things, but they don't. They find that one particular thing. Let's take a look at that. I see a couple of articles up here. Let's do Russ's first.
I couldn't find it, but I did find something else related to the Smithsonian. Evidently, there's a lot of stuff that goes on at the Smithsonian that we don't know about from this very reputable website.
Well, before we continue, Hogtie, I'd like Druss to follow up on why we should throw out digestive cookies and what other 16-store cupboard foods we should throw out.
I'm glad
that's like a more important article for us to be looking at.
Oh, there's much more interesting stories.
Yeah,
we got to go back. We got to go back to Druss. I just put so Smithsonian employee accused of raping a 2,500-year-old mummy. That may or may not be a true story. A person would have to look into the details of it. Let's go to the one we know it's not true. So can you give us what's the domain name for this website?
This is worldnewsdailyreport.com.
World News Daily Report. Okay, that's right. So the headline reading, Smithsonian admits to destruction of thousands of giant human skeletons in early 1900s. I found this in 2 seconds by typing Smithsonian admits to, and then Google automatically filled in destruction of thousands of giant human skeletons. So you can go to this website, you can scroll down a little bit. The article itself opens by mentioning a U.S. Supreme Court ruling, one that's completely fictitious, where the U.S. Supreme Court had instructed the Smithsonian to release these records about this destruction of these giant human skeletons. I like that word. That apparently had happened in the early 1900s. So yeah, people can go ahead and look at this article. I don't want to visit it too long here because I know it just happened in Steve's Hangout, but it's worth touching on this notion that it refers to this U.S. Supreme Court case that has never happened. If you scroll down a bit more, we'll see that there. Oh, what do you got there? You're highlighting something between
6 to 12 feet. So it's going from a normal human sized up to someone that's well over anything that we've ever observed in nature.
Yeah,
I thought that was just kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, and if you scroll down a bit, let's go. So zab, people can read.
Well, just before you do, if you go back up to the top, the beginning of the second paragraph, the allegations stemming from the American Institute of Alternative Archaeology. I've just Googled that. It goes straight back to this story. So I'm that institute doesn't exist. Now,
the American Institution.
You're talking about fact checking. Now, you don't even have to go to the bottom of the page. You just do a search for that, and question marks should be raised immediately. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt.
So that's a great interruption. The American Institution of Alternative Archaeology, the AIAA. That's delicious. We can scroll down to some of the other stories that a person would find on this page. Actually, right there beside, down, you're going too far. Back up a bit.
Just to note there, Hogtie, the gentleman in the photo is from the American Association of Alternative Archaeology.
Oh, is that a different?
That's quadruple A.
That's quadruple A. Well, there you go.
That's what you call when you find a 3-foot femur in your backyard.
3-foot femur. That's a decent looking femur. Yeah. Other news.
Can we just out of interest? Can we click on a couple of the stories on the right hand side? I'm particularly interested in the trained squirrels.
Oh, the squirrels.
I want to know how a woman got a baby in her vagina.
Yeah.
I can explain that to you later.
Let's go to the squirrels. Let's go to the squirrels. We're trying to keep this family friendly. No, I want to see the squirrel story. Then we'll go back to the others.
What's the squirrel story?
Go back up. You're way below it now.
It was the second one on the right hand side.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just beautiful, isn't it? That's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Is that her mugshot? That's gotta be her mugshot.
Yeah,
45 years. I figured out she's actually looking at a very small, invisible squirrel just in the bridge of her nose.
And why is she smiling like that? What about the man who dies after 30 7 edible condoms during wild sex orgy.
Can we concentrate on the squirrels? What's it saying she did?
45-year-old Janice Smith was arrested this morning by officers of the Detroit Police Department for allegedly capturing numerous squirrels and training them to attack her former lover. The victim, 51-year-old James Robertson, was presumably attacked by the rodents on more than a dozen occasions over. I love the wording over the last month.
Let me ask
presumably.
you this. Yeah, let's presumably. Just go back up. Tell me. Okay, so this story happened. Trained them to attack. What is the date of this news story? I'm going to just toss into the discussion here a little Snopes tip for sniffing. I mean, this doesn't pass a sniff test easily, but go ahead and look. Okay, so there's some comments from April.
September 2017.
But go
no, it wasn't. It was before that, because that's why I went down to the comments, because the comments, the newest one we've got is April 3rd.
Sure.
So they were getting talked about before the date of the article. Okay.
Right. Well, no, the date on the top of the article just keeps rolling with whatever the date is.
Yeah,
current.
That's the topic today.
What you're posting gets whatever date you post on.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and that's this is one of the Snopes tricks for figuring out. I mean, this thing doesn't pass the sniff test at first, but this is one of the Snopes tricks for figuring out whether or not what an article refers to earlier this month or on Thursday, and it gives these sort of vague dates that would fit in at any time. Compare it to an actual news story. Go to a BBC website, or you go to the Fox News website. Their stories are properly dated. No, I don't mean to actually go to it. People can do that on their own. Yeah. What's this? Merkel wins 4th term in Germany. Is there actually a date on that story?
15 minutes ago.
No kidding. There you go. Well, let's go back to the Giants thing. And
that one's accurate. I got twittered by news agencies about that one.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the actual Giants thing, and then we'll sort of move on from there. Down to Fiona's favorite part, the very bottom of the page.
Oh, can I read it, please?
Oh, please, Fiona, the floor is yours.
I need to wait till he gets to it.
Just hit the end button. Just hit end. Oh my goodness, daylight's burning here, man.
Okay. Right. World News Daily Report assumes all responsibility for the satirical nature of its articles and for the fictional nature of their content. All characters appearing in the articles in this website, even those based on real people, are entirely fictional, and any resemblance between them and any person living, dead, or undead is purely a miracle.
I love the reference to the undead.
I know.
Reginald, why are you shaking your head like that?
Let's address G-Man's rebuttal to this. So he had heard that people were criticizing this because it clearly comes from a satirical website, and I mean, it would be, I'm going to try to go as far as I can here with G-Man's thinking. It would be fallacious to say, well, the story isn't true because it appears on a satirical website. I think I'd mentioned before in previous Hangouts, I used to love reading Weekly World News, and the actual greasy paper, your hands would always turn black. Bat Boy, people might remember the Adventures of Bat Boy. I used to love that thing. And then once in a while you'd read, there was one story I saw down on the right-hand side towards the bottom about a university professor who taught at the University of Edmonton in Canada, which there is no such university, but they gave his first and last name. And it is a guy who had been a professor of mine. And I remember him talking about this, where they'd done a study in the late 70s about how weather affects mood. And it was reported that thing was reported in the Weekly World News in about 1995. And it was weird because I was like, this is an actual true story. Also, they told the story about a guy who fell off the balcony of a building, and I think it was the 18th or 20th story, and he survived.
He got sucked in lower down, didn't he? Into it. Someone opened the window and he got sucked in.
No. This is a true story. It's actually happened in Edmonton. When the guy was falling, he grabbed onto the cable. A lot of these older buildings, the coaxial cable for your TV. They're just pinned on the outside of the building, and he grabbed onto the cable, and the pins were coming up, pa-ding, 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 and it slowed down his fall, so it merely broke his rib cage and his pelvis, and I think one femur. So he was very, very seriously injured, but he did survive it. And this story was in the Weekly World News absent the accurate description of how incredibly badly injured this guy was. But that was a true story. So a lot of times stories in the Weekly World News were true. They would throw in an occasional true story just to keep you wrong-footed. But that doesn't mean that I mean, just because Bat Boy's not true doesn't mean that it isn't true that this professor talked about the mood weather affecting your mood, and about this guy falling off the balcony. Those are real things. Anyway, so let to the point.
Hogtie, stop gaslighting the internet, please.
Gaslighting.
Bad Boy is real. Stop lying.
Oh, that's right. Gaslighting. I just, but okay. So G-Man now is concerned that people are being, and what he calls intellectually dishonest. We could have a whole discussion about what the hell does G-Man mean when he says you're being intellectually dishonest, because it's just a thing he throws out all the time. But he says that people are being intellectually dishonest by criticizing him for bringing up this World News Daily Report thing, whatever it's called. It's saying, well, oh, they're saying supposedly it's satirical, but that's not the only site I went to. I also went to YouTube, and they're not addressing that. Well, all he did, he went on YouTube and he typed, search for giant bones, Smithsonian, or whatever he searched for, and there are videos discussing that article about them destroying these things.
Interesting thing about that, I've actually done almost exactly the same search as him, because I recognize that order of videos, and I think it's the fourth or fifth one down. There's a big guy with like a really good pair of mutton chops, sort of beard, sideburns, and a beard, and this is actually a real guy. He's 6'2" tall. He's an Iranian bodybuilder, and he's really famous for doing what he does.
6'2".
He's only 6'2". But that's how I know what you're saying. He's 6'2", 6'3", somewhere around that. He wasn't as tall as I thought he was. And that just, G-Man, that just shows I have been through a lot of these videos. I have actually critiqued them. I have actually looked into the background and probably give them way much more credibility than they probably deserve.
Can I just say something? I think I'm reasonably good at judging body language, and it seems to me that Reginald is desperate to get something off his chest because he's been shaking his head in despair for some time.
No, he just needs a pee. That's all. It's just a pee.
It's gonna go. Reginald, what's on your mind?
No, I'm fine, guys. I think I'm just in disbelief. It's been a while since I guess I've engaged. I think the very last time I remember really engaging with someone almost as clueless as G-Man, I guess was with Kent Hovind many years ago before he got locked up. And it's just amazing to me that with his vocabulary, of course, which he uses out of context quite often, just G-Man guy, that he just does not have this ability to discern how to use the proper articles and how to do proper research. And I mean, I'm still just amazed. Everything I'm hearing you guys say is almost surreal to me. I guess I've been out of the game for so long now. I just can't believe people are still that wholly clueless and ignorant.
Well, Reginald, I'll tell you something interesting that happened. I mean, DPR has been busy with sort of other ventures lately, so we don't necessarily bump into each other very often. We sort of occasionally collide on the internet, but he and I have been doing this for some time, and we were both in the live chat when that debate was going on. And he made the same observation I did at almost exactly the same time. And it was along the lines of I knew that G-Man was going to do badly, and I knew that it was actually going to be surprisingly badly, but I'm surprised that he's doing as badly as he is, like bringing in this satirical article and doing this YouTube search and that sort of thing. Okay. So yeah, if you know what I mean, I think we all kind of felt that way. That
okay, it's not just me then. I mean, because I knew that he would do bad as well, but I think just the first 6 minutes, I was blown away by the sheer ignorance.
But I think I expressed it. Yeah. I didn't expect him to do well, but I didn't really think he would do this badly. I mean, I just thought it was staggering.
Yeah.
Just
I figured he was going to bring up the hoax.
How do we rank this against the translocation of animals article that I remember being brought up by somebody?
That was nothing free, and this is worse because the translocation of animals was at least one mistake. But not to digress on that, because I do want to this I'll admit this will be a digression, but I do want to ask Reginald this question. One of G-Man's recent drums that he beats is the idea that the so-called evolutionists online are arguing against Kent Hovind. I say this because you mentioned Kent Hovind, and he's got a fairly long history in this discussion. But one of the things G-Man's been saying is these evolutionists are arguing against Kent Hovind like this. Well, since Kent Hovind went to jail, he must be wrong about evolution. What's your take on that, on G-Man's packaging of our position on Kent Hovind's credibility?
See, again, I guess I think many of us are also educators. Again, I just kind of would use the Socratic method against him. If I was talking to G-Man and he said that, I would say, okay, well, many civil rights activists went to jail, so they're all obviously really, really bad people. So you can't really, I don't think that's the argument. We're looking at the content of their arguments and the nature of what they're saying, what they're doing. That's what's more important. So I could care less whether Kent Hovind went to jail. I think it's just hilarious that he did. But I think we should focus on the content of his words and his claims. I mean,
Reggie,
so,
yeah. I know that one of these days I'm gonna set you up to talk to G-Man. The second you would have brought up civil rights, you would have heard, whoa, wait. You cannot use analogies with G-Man. He does not accept that one scenario is analogous to another at all.
Okay, that makes sense. I did hear him with the other day. I think it was with the link you sent me. Sure enough, yes, I did hear that he does have. Okay, I do concede that he does have difficulty understanding where you're going. So yeah, so maybe with him, the best thing to do is just get him to answer his own questions by making him feel like he's superior. I mean, that works. I mean, that really works a lot with some people. I mean, you let them take the reins and you just ask them questions. But you word them in such a way that he ends up tripping on himself because it's just not logical. And then you say, well, how does that match with this? And he just can't make it jive. And so for people like that, I think that might be the best thing to do, because I think facts, reason, logic, with people like that, it doesn't work. You got to get them to eventually recognize and see their own mistakes and their own errors.
Well, I kind of want to discourage you from that in the sense that I take your point when I think you're talking about the generality of like when you're trying to help somebody understand something, especially when it requires some significant basal changes in their thinking. But I don't want to sound like the jaded person here, but it just, I don't have those discussions with G-Man that way. I mean, because there are any number of topics that if G-Man wanted to come to understand, I would be happy. I would really even appreciate the opportunity to say, well, oh, he doesn't understand this, and he wants to learn it, and I wonder if I can think about it and package it in a way that he can understand it, because I know G-Man is capable of learning things. We've seen him do it, and I know he's excited when he learns stuff. It's a very, very cool thing to see when the light bulb goes on for G-Man. But this particular topic, in my view, it's completely wasted mental, you're burning off your neurons for no reason to try to sit down and say, well, how would I explain evolutionary theory to G-Man? Because his barrier isn't his learning impairments. His barrier isn't even the history of bad things he's been told. His barrier is a defiant, insistent refusal to learn these things. And again, that's evidenced by these facts of how he just keeps repeating these same idiotic questions. Like even today, he comes up with, could a dinosaur turn into a non-dinosaur? Like he's not listening. He won't listen. It's a fearful thing for some of these people, notably G-Man. It's a very, very fearful thing for them to come to understand that there's actually some justification for believing in common ancestry.
I mean, I'd love to have a chat with G-Man about, the rise of the Frankish Empire in Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire, and actually how that impacted on the spread of Christianity across Northern Europe, where you had the Arian movement of Christianity versus the Catholic movement, and it actually all came down just to one marriage.
Yeah, but Strauss, those aren't real Christians.
Yeah.
That would be G-Man's response.
No, I know, but it's still the foundation of why Christianity spread across Europe in the way that it did, in the form that it did, and that's why you then got to the Reformation, because all of that then actually follows through to the Reformation, and why there was the separation, because they'd already had the Great Schism back in 1036, correct me, Jade, if I'm wrong, between Orthodoxy, the Orthodox, the Greek, the Russian, and the Church of Constantinople and the Pope, and why that actually occurred, and actually how that then was the justification of, again, the Reformationary split between the Protestant and the Catholic Church.
Okay, Russ, the problem with everything you've just said is, one, you've mentioned the Pope, and that'll trigger G-Man, and two, he's going to ask you, what does Frank have anything to do with this?
Yeah, but remember, Pope comes on a rope. But I think I have a fascination with history. I have fascination with the origins of things. That is one of the things that drives me as a person. But I think for understanding where your beliefs come from, where they're there, it's like the humanism thing. and Jade, and you know, in that hangout, and I was looking at it, I thought, oh my God, you know, Thomas Aquinas, Erasmus, you know, these are key figures in biblical, you know, in Christian history that they should be aware of, and I'm not even a Christian, and I know about them. You know, and it just, yeah, I think is about the best I can come up with. When are we going for a pint, Rumpus? You keep holding one up on Facebook.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, right. Yeah, we should have. That's right, because you're not that far away from me, are you?
Yeah, I'm going to be in London in a couple of weeks as well.
I've been getting some messages about the links in the description being messed up. I see exactly what happened, and they are fixed as of now. For people really curious, you can hit reload. If not, it'll be there in the future. Rumpus has joined us after me sending the link to DPR repeatedly instead of into the proper chat where the Rumpus was waiting for the link. And then while Rumpus, just go.
Well,
go ahead I'm going to return to our list of topics. What's that? You did what now?
Oh, great, thanks. So I missed the drama. I assumed I've missed it and all been deleted. No, I think I'll flip again. And I've just sort of like sympathise with poor old Jay trying to communicate with G-Man about dog, non-dog. But I think diagrams, as per usual, my answer is always diagrams. I almost went into trying to find G-Man. I thought I could do this with the diagrams. There's a fantastic website showing you the tree of life and all the things, and you can just go through it and say, look, from here on downwards, G-Man, those things are dogs, and like Americans, they're the European Americans are from Britain. You could argue they still got their British ancestry. You could call them British in some ways, but we don't call them British now. Even so, if a dog sort of evolved into sort of bat-like thing, as Jade suggested, we wouldn't call it a dog, even though it's got a dog ancestry. Just like Americans now, although they've got British ancestry.
Not all
we don't call them.
I'll just add in for Rumpus there all the important ones, Sudu.
Yeah, you know, I've thought about this too, like because there are a couple of themes things that G-Man gets wrong that I've kind of thought, well, you know, I could explain this to him, like the idea of when people say, well, are we a fish or are we fish or not fish or whatever, and then people will say, yeah, but are you using the word paraphyletically? Well, how's G-Man going to latch onto that? I think people need to.
Look, he thought they were called isotopes, and you want him to know what paraphyletically means.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't necessarily helpful. So, I mean, I've thought of these examples like, you know, if you had a married couple that moved to some new area of the country and then, you know, so whatever, the Smith family, and they had lots of kids, but then he had a fight with one of his sons. And he's just like, you're no son of mine. And he moved to the other side of town, the other side of the county, and they just no longer had an interaction, didn't consider himself part of the family. And then you would say, well, basically the Smith family is everybody who's a descendant of this original couple, except for those people over there. And that's sort of the quick version of it. But I've sort of thought of like, well, these are helpful examples to explain the difference, because technically they are still part of the family. They are still related. If you said, well, identify all of your blood relatives, well, those would all be the descendants of those original people. But if you say, well, who's really in the family? Well, those people are out of the family, right? So you have this paraphyletic thing where you got your pyramid, but then there's one little part is sort of over here and it's a separate group. And that's kind of how we use words like fish, for example. In fact, a lot of times it's how we use the word animals. If you say, are humans animals? Well, I used to work at one of these horse places when I was out east for a while, and there was a sign where there was a food prep area, because they had horses and they had llamas, for crying out loud, the goats and whatever else, and there was a sign towards it. There was a fence with a little walkway thing through it, and there was a sign on that said no animals beyond this point. Well, you know what? Lots of human beings walk right
stood
past
there
that
for
sign.
days.
Yeah, I know.
And days.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like people would see that sign and they would just walk right past it, because it's understood what's meant by animals, and the cats would go through too, because in that
it's specificity, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, just like we say Americans are no longer called British, and then, you know, we're no longer called. It's not specific enough to say humans are animals, so we don't tend to use the general term, even though we are descended from them. We are in that subset of them. And I think G-Man about paraphyletic, I think you just need to say, treat it like genealogy for him, and then say, you know, okay, you know that you're descended from whoever, but you're still one. No matter how many children you have, whatever children you do have, they'll always be descended from that your ancestor. No matter what they do, no matter what they look like, even if they turn into rabbits, they'll still be descended from your ancestors, and they'll still be.
I think there's a reason why that argument would not work, and it's basically that he would rely on yes, but they may change slightly, but they're still the same kind as me.
Which is fine, and again, too, even as we're laying this out, I think people see where we're going. It wouldn't be able to do it at the same pace that we just described it. But notice too that where you get tripped up, as Jade had done in her video, she said even if dogs were to change morphologically, yes, we're going to get to morphology, the now debunked area of morphology. Even if dogs were to change so significantly morphologically that they could actually take flight. they would still be dogs. They would still be canids, right? They would still be mammals. They would still be eukaryotes, right? They would still maintain all of that heritage from their classification would persist from their heritage. But then G-Man's response to that is to say, oh, well, Jade's saying that dogs can turn into bats. And that's not what her video said. And even this now, as DPR had said, they said, even if, or was it, sorry, Rumpus, even if these creatures would change so much morphologically, they would still be in that same clade. And it's a hypothetical to show, G-Man does not do well with hypotheticals, is another point to be made. It's a hypothetical to show that even if there were significant morphological changes, they would still be in that classification. But as soon as you use that as an example, he then forgets that that's a hypothetical and forgets your key point and then latches onto the idea that you're insisting that dogs do turn into bats. I mean, this is the same guy who was demanding proof the other day. This is so funny. He was demanding proof the other day for give me proof that whales grew feet and came out and started walking on land. Not a single person has ever made that claim. Jade was saying, look, you've got it backwards again. Let me try to explain. He's interrupting her constantly. He wouldn't listen. And you know, it's the other way around. And she finally says, no, no, no. We believe that whales came from a terrestrial animal. And G-Man said, what? Are you recording this? Zulu, are you recording this? Jade just said that whales come from outer space. And my kids are still laughing about it because...
I'm sorry, Hogtie, but at this point, whales might as well just come from outer space. That would make far more sense than
I've got to get back to the point that DPR made in countering margin. I think you can say to G-Man, though, G-Man, if you just accept the macroevolution for the moment, because remember, we're presenting you with our model, so this is in our model how it works. If you prepare to accept, for the purposes of this argument, that things can change shape and evolve and become different kinds, so if you please accept that for the moment, I think you can take that on board, then here we go. Then it's just all about your ancestry is what determines whether you're a dog or not, and whether or eukaryote and an animal. And I think you could get to him with a diagram. You could tackle him on that, providing you say, okay, you know, accept this principle for the moment, because we're talking about our model, not your model. We're talking about explaining our model to you. So you've got to explain it with our rules, and that rule includes being able to change dramatically your shape and looking like a bat if you want a dog.
Yeah, okay. I accept it may be possible that you could get through to him at some level, but there's something else that came out in the debate that I want to return to, if I may, because quickly, I desperately hope it's being recorded, because G-Man discussed at some point briefly what a kind was. And so far as I remember, he said a kind can include a species, and then went on with another couple of bits and pieces about kinds.
I can tell you pretty much exactly what he said, DPR. Basically,
please do. And a video with him explaining what a kind is.
Yeah, so he basically said, well, you know, kinds is how we describe stuff, but what you scientists people have done has taken that classification thing away from Christianity. Was where it was a really garbled kind of piece.
He said a bit more than that, but hey, as long as the thing's recorded, we can go back and check it. But anyway, I'll be right back.
Well, do we know what discussion is? So there is one video up on the True Empiricism channel that it looks like it wrapped up about 39 minutes ago. It has a running time of about 1 hour 55 minutes. So I understand that they were actually sniped. They then opened up another hangout. Again, I mean, they're invited to come in. We can be civil, and we ought to be. Do we know if there's another hangout that Jade go?
I don't know, but I just
Jade?
want to say I'm currently downloading the first one.
Oh, we can tell because your internet speed just went to hell. So
yeah.
I don't know what you were saying.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I ended up asking him, someone sent me this question. At what point does a person of Slavic descent not become a person from Slavic descent? And he couldn't answer the question at all. And I thought that was interesting. I forgot who sent it. It might have been Drust that sent that to me. Was it you, Drust?
Yeah, I don't know how that I don't know how that helps though, because the person of Slavic descent is a person of Slavic descent. Are you saying, like, at what point do their kids? Is it their kids or their grandkids or their great-grandkids or their great-great-grandkids? Are they no longer of Slavic descent? I mean, part of the muddying of the language has to do with about a dog turning into something, when obviously what we mean is a population of dogs producing subsequent generations that are later something. So that's why I don't necessarily. I mean, the descent thing too is the nationality as an attribute. I find a little bit deceptive in conversation. It doesn't really capture what I think we're trying to capture.
Yeah. I tried going down the road once of saying, well, hold on a second, your ancestry is fixed. That's a known quantity that, you know, we know that's right. That what's going forward is our you know, the unknown. This is the stuff we don't know is going to happen. So what we can certainly say, go on, Rumpus, you fill in.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just this whole time saying the Slavic question is invalid or something. I couldn't quite understand, because to me that's a perfect example. You are Slavic descent, and you'll always be of Slavic descent. That's perfect. I think no, I'm quite disagreeing with that.
No, what I mean is, because if you're a person, if you're talking about one person, if a person is of Slavic descent, well, then that's an attribute of that person. They're of Slavic descent. But I think that. Well, that's the thing. That's not what. I'm encouraging people to take care of their language when you're talking about a person versus a population or a group of organisms, because that person of Slavic descent is always of Slavic descent. But I'm saying the question you mean to focus is then, are their children also of Slavic descent? And even in that case, I find the nationality thing is a little bit. Yeah, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, I should have been more careful with the language, and welcome, Maddie. And I think that the language needs to be as succinct as possible, especially when you're talking to G-Man. And I completely agree, because I think all of us understand the point that the question was getting at. But if G-Man's hearing the question, he's going to answer it for its face value. He's not going to see that the descendants of someone who's Slavic, they're going to continue to be Slavic, and their descendants are going to continue to be Slavic, and so on and so forth.
No, they're going to continue to be Slavic descent. They're not necessarily continue to be Slavic. They could go off and be someone else, and they wouldn't be Slavic. But potentially, well, depending if you take it from where they live, they would cease to be Slavic. But if they move to, I don't know, Australia or something, they become Australian, they cease to be Slavic.
Oh, you're dead horses. Hey, so we're joined by Chris. I do want to not. Was it Jade had said at some point she wanted to talk about morphology? We had a funny observation in there. Let's sort of keep things moving along relatively crisply. Jade or Mr. Mowdy, who wants to jump in? Unmute first. Jade, you're in. Did you want to say something about morphology, the now defunct field of morphology?
I paused my download, so hopefully you can hear me better.
You're good. You're good.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to say is sorry, I stopped for a minute. Freddie just did an incredible feat of leaping, which is surprising given Freddie. It's like I'm now talking and he has to somehow get my attention. But anyway, they complain. They say, well, you can't say this came from this because they just look alike. Yeah, that's basically the way they say it.
Yeah.
You can't say, well, the problem is that's how we classify everything. And when we say look-alike, we're not just talking about gross morphology either, which is something I don't think they understand. We're looking at morphology on a microscopic level. We're looking at it at an anatomical level. We combine that with physiology and embryology and genetics. But as far as morphology goes, criteria would they give for classifying something as a bird? We've got an emu, we've got an ostrich, we've got a hawk, we've got an eagle, we've got a buzzard, we've got a hummingbird, we've got a duck, we've got a penguin.
Yeah, throw a penguin in, yeah.
Cormorant, we've got we could go on and list birds. How do we know something's a bird?
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. About 3 or 4 years ago.
You've been reading your avian book again, haven't you?
Yeah. Hang on a second. I think we just interrupted Jade. I thought you were sort of ending on a Socratic question there, but.
I was.
Okay, I apologize. Okay. I remember trying to make a case like that before, like getting on this issue about are humans apes, and this was I think addressing a point that Aaron Ra would raise for a time. He would say, well, humans are apes. Right, that's an indisputable thing. It would be like saying that motorcycles are motor vehicles. That's not to say that because you say that a motorcycle is an example of a motor vehicle, you've got a classification rule that fits motorcycles into motor vehicles. You're not saying that you think motorcycles are a speciated descendant specialized speciated descendant of trucks or something, right? It's to say this is how we classify it. So unquestionably, humans are classified as apes. Whether or not we and the other apes also share a common ancestor, that needs to be decided on an evidentiary basis. We need to find the evidence to say that all of the things that we classify as apes are also from descendants of an ancient ape, right? But in that discussion with G-Man, when I was asking him, like how would you define what an ape is? What are the aspects of morphology or behavior or genetics or whatever else that makes somebody look at something and say, well, that's an ape, right? And he says, of course, the things I'm looking for has to do with the way the shoulder cuff works, the flat fingernails. He goes, all mammals have claws. There are 5 species of mammals that don't have claws, right? Extant, sorry to say, 5 extant species of animals that don't have claws, but instead have flat fingernails. And they are orangutan, gorilla, chimpanzee, bonobo, and humans. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. So I asked him, so what's the definition? Like, how would you know that something's an ape? And G-Man said, go to the zoo. And I said, go to the zoo, because because what he said was so incredibly childish. You know,
go to the library.
How do you even have that discussion, right? But yeah, it's when you go to define the birds. I mean, yeah, I mean, if they say, well, why do birds have hollow bones? Well, because they fly. Well, bats fly, penguins don't, ostriches don't. Start again. Reginald, you may notice that those of us who are sort of well acquainted with each other are very aggressive at knowing when to land right on the end of someone else's sentence and not letting you talk. Please shoulder in, like make yourself to home, as we say in my
I try to
country.
tell him to be mean, but he won't listen.
God damn it!
Make yourself to home. That's a
struggling with his.
Do penguins have hollow bones? Presumably not.
In
the
fact,
birds.
They do.
They do have hollow
They
bones.
do. They're very floaty. They're very floaty.
I thought that'd be a big thing for penguins. They wouldn't want to be floaty. I would have thought they'd be want to be sinky.
Just something as a thought.
Rumpus, that would make it rather difficult to be swimmy then, wouldn't it?
Well, you want to be neutral, I think, actually, what you want to be. Normally it's quite, if you're slightly sinky, then you can flap about a bit and keep yourself. I mean, sharks have to move forwards to keep themselves, they're quite sinky, and so they have to move.
Oh,
to
sinky!
Yeah, I know. Rumpus is using those technical terms again. From
No. I thought he said stinky, and I thought I must be a penguin.
No. No. So,
I don't.
I'm just surprised with you.
Well, let's see what Google has to say.
No, we're doing this. You're right. You're on it. We're doing this. We're not. This is an example of truth seeking. I've never seen a penguin. What? Who's yelling? Here's the weird thing, though, is when I say
I thought only elephants and we had knees. I thought we were the only 2 animals that had knees.
Oh, what? Lots of things. Oh, you mean the kneecaps themselves? We'll get into that. So
yeah.
Why is that in my search?
Yeah, I was going to ask you to click on the for sale. How much does a penguin skeleton cost?
Okay, let's look up penguin skeleton.
It's funny, we were just talking about that. I taught marine science last year. And penguins was of course one of the major topics that we were talking about. And interestingly enough, we used to work for Skulls Unlimited. Anyway,
all right.
That's too funny, but anyway. But yeah, we're talking about that because students were wondering, why are their bones dense and whatnot, and we start talking about the anatomy.
That wasn't my question.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You used to work for Skulls Unlimited? We got to pick up with that. You used to work for
one of
Skulls
their offshoots here in Florida, actually, the Skeleton Museum. I was their education director.
Okay. That's fascinating.
See right there. Yeah.
A wonderful coincidence.
Did you ever sell a penguin?
Yeah, let's go to the penguin. So what do you know about, now officially our penguin skeleton expert, what do you know about the, I don't even know what to search for. Just do you know anything about that?
Are we trying to find out whether penguins have hollow bones?
Rumpus,
if you will take the site I've found here, which starts with Reddit, and then goes into a page of Ask Science and comments. Someone has commented and pointed out that some birds like loons and grebes have solid bones to aid in diving.
Really?
Fishing. Now, true flightless birds such as ostriches and penguins have solid bones. In the case of the ostrich, some bones are hollow and some are solid.
That's right.
Probably the
Give us a
latest.
link.
They don't need the hollow bone to keep them less weight for flight, so the bones can become denser in time.
Well, if you think about it, if they're running,
and if you're
then
running, you don't want hollow bones to run on, so the ostrich leg bones would need to be denser.
And the effects of gravity. And
another thing just on the wow factor is the fact that one of the other things that I was thinking of recently is, you know, they keep talking about, oh, well, you don't get these new functions through mutation. And I always like to argue from their point of view of kind. So bats are a kind. And we have bats that have echolocation, but we have bats that don't use echolocation.
Okay, hold on, don't just gallop and fire hoses here. We're getting to the bottom of this thing with the bones, because I made the claim. And listen, if I'm wrong about this, then this gets to be yet another occasion that somebody gets to say, "Yeah, look, Octai opened his mouth and he was wrong." It's my understanding. I mean, they do have their bones are denser, but they're still hollow. They still they're what's called pneumatic bones. Actually, maybe that's a good search to do for. This is happening. We are getting to the bottom of this. When
As I say, I'd be very surprised.
Hogtie, how do you define a hollow bone versus a solid bone? Because aren't all bones technically got air spaces in them?
No. There's no airflow through mammal bones.
Okay.
No.
Not airflow, but they're not solid.
No. They're not
airflow, but like a spongy. There's like a spongy, like sponge toffee type center.
There's a marrow in it.
So there is a hollow air space.
There were not air gaps.
Yeah.
Not air gaps.
I'd be very surprised if they were solid, because purely from an economic point of view, so far as strength to weight ratio is concerned, a solid bone is not likely to be as strong as a inverted commas hollow bone.
Right. Well, okay, when we say solid, okay, again, this will be one of those define your terms things.
I don't know of
any creature. Yeah, I don't know of any creature that has a solid bone in the sense of it is entirely a calcified, hard, bony material.
Yeah, calcium.
Right. I mean, even fairly small bones. So, say for example, the little bones of the carpus, they look like little pebbles, but in cross section, they look like what do I want to say? Like, I want to say Smarties, but that's not gonna. Damn it! What are they called? Rockets in the States? Okay, they're like candy coated Maltesers, yeah. So they have a rigid shell to them, but it's an irregular shape, and then inside is very soft, spongy material. Some of it is calcified, rigid bone, but it sort of goes in these little. Reginald's shaking his head. We're doing some bad anatomy here. Or you're looking for something. You worked at the Skull Emporium.
Yeah, we've got an expert here. Come on.
Bird bones actually have great gaps of air, so they actually can move around the bones because there's the connected areas of.
So they can fart and fly, right?
They can fart when they fly, yeah. Fart and fly. Fart to fly. Yeah. Well, I'm just clarifying. I'm not talking about a solid bone, like a
resident expert here,
like a solid piece of steel. Yeah, we'll get to the thing, but I just want to be clear. We're not talking. We talk about bones. They're not like a solid all the way through the core. We're saying that air can't flow through them because there's other living tissue inside of it.
Yes.
I mean, I think you mentioned the terms earlier, and that's why they call them pneumatic and non-pneumatic. I mean, so you're right. I mean, there's no such thing. It doesn't make any sense, physiologically, obviously, to have. This isn't Wolverine. So obviously, we're talking about penguins themselves, of course, right? They are non-pneumatic. Period. They have non-pneumatic bone. They're what they consider solid bones. And of course, that helps counteract the natural buoyancy they have because of all that fat. So that's why they're so dense. They'll be lighter if they didn't have so much fat. In that instance,
they have to be spit stinky. Yes, quite.
So sorry, penguin bones are non-pneumatic, and the ostrich bones, because it's happening again. And I mean, this is the thing too. I know true empiricism likes to kind of make an issue out of you correct somebody and they say something wrong. I'm actually. Boy, it makes sense to me too. Somebody fire off a link though. Because we're gonna settle this issue. Penguins and ostriches, non-pneumatic bones seems to be the way the wind's blowing.
Nice to know.
But have you ever seen this happen in one of the other rooms when somebody makes a definitive statement and other people say, "Well, that doesn't make sense to me," and then other people say, "Well, that's because that guy's wrong," and then you actually look it up and get it settled and move on. Because
we're in this room, we yell, "Let's Google it."
Let's Google. Let's get on it.
Well, we have people in the room with an education. I mean, that's kind of what's missing overall in their rooms.
Well, everybody has an education.
I rather suspect Reginald's got a better understanding of this than you're going to get on a quick Google search.
Well, yeah, and we also do anatomy. We've also do dissections and stuff like that in my lab. So I mean, I mean, and again, you can Google it, so it's not that difficult.
I've done lots of dissections on a variety of creatures. I've never taken apart a penguin though. And
so Reginald, are you saying that penguin bones are non-pneumatic in the sense there are no air gaps in them from which air can flow?
Well, correct.
That's your statement. Right. Okay.
But,
okay.
But at the same time, you would not describe them as solid.
Correct. Yeah. Because that's just what the colloquial kind of characteristic is. That's kind of what we attributed to it. Because they are dense, but they don't have air spaces. And again, it is what is characteristic of penguins. And again, we know this. It helps aid in their diving. Imagine having all that fat and having air spaces wouldn't work out very well. They'll have to use a lot more energy to actually swim.
Yeah. Right, so they're non-pneumatic, and you could euphemistically call that solid because it's condensed matter. It's not a gas in there, so you could call that solid and non-pneumatic.
Right, and fluid, right? If you fill a space with fluid as well.
Yes, or liquid would count. Yeah. Yes. Non-gaseous, yes. Yeah. Which I think is because that's solid. I suppose liquid would be actually.
And not to mention, if you think about, and of course, I mean that'll be kind of a liability for them to have as well, especially when they do deep diving. You definitely you don't want to have air. Pockets.
Yes.
In your bones.
Yeah, because of course it's the air pockets of air in your lungs that kill you. You get killed by when you dive deeply. It's your lungs where the air spaces you have that get crushed that cause you to have point. If you didn't have any air spaces, like a fish, it's got its swim bladder, I suppose. But
exactly.
Hey, well, what I want to see, and I've been looking for, is actually show me some cross sections of these bones. Show me some longitudinal sections of these bones. And the reason is this is because here's what I think is exactly not the case, right? So if you take apart a mammal bones, you do a cross section, take another bone, do a longitudinal section. There's a very familiar structure to mammalian long bones. Based on the marrow and the spongy tissue that's all in there. Like there's a very familiar pattern to that. And then when you look at birds, so chicken bones, turkey bones, whatever else, they look very, very different. And there's actually air can flow right through them. And what I'm saying is it is not the case that this would blow my mind. If it's the case that you took apart a penguin bone and it looked like the mammal bone. I think what would make some sense to me is that the penguin bones, so bird bones are very clearly different from other mammals or other mammals.
Correct. It would look more like a bird's bones, right. Of course.
But then I would say that the penguin's bones would be a specialization of a pneumatic bone, but it just happens to be non-pneumatic. In the same way that people will point out, like we were talking about tetrapods. Everybody's been throwing out this lately. We've been talking a lot about tetrapods, and then people say, "Oh, G-Man's not getting it." And people are throwing out this definition that the tetrapods are those animals that have a backbone and 4 limbs. Right. Well, okay. Are whales tetrapods then, or are snakes tetrapods? Right. So you have things like these creatures that come from land, but then some of their descendants go into the water, and they don't have necessarily what you would call limbs, but they would still be of the clade Tetrapoda. Right. And this is what I would think about the bird skeletons is that birds have these pneumatic chambers through their bones, but then there's a further specialization on those pneumatic bones that actually renders them non-pneumatic. But it's not the case that they reverted to happen to match with
no, not at all. Yeah. I mean, in fact, they just call them tracheae. I mean, that's what they are. I mean, so essentially, but yeah, since they serve obviously, as we discussed, since they no longer have these air spaces in them, then yeah, they're just filled with water. So, and they're more dense, so they're not as wide. The gaps are not as large, so we just call them tracheae. And that's what they are. But we don't tend to refer to that. But I like that concept. Perhaps it is. It's obviously it's a specialization and of pneumatic bone, obviously. But with penguins, we just call it non-pneumatic.
Do they have bone marrow? Someone in the chat has made a mention of that, and I was thinking of that as well. Yeah, do penguins have bone marrow?
I've never known
because they could just fill up the gaps with some sort of solidy gungy substance or something that's just not similar density to water that was semi-solid like a mammal.
Some kind of aqueous solution.
No, not I'm saying liquid. It has to be solid, otherwise it would be wiggling around or something. But just something semi. In other words, it's something clearly. You could have the bone which has all the structure of a hollow bone, but just with the bits filled in with something else. So you could see there are 2 different structures in there. Whereas in the mammalian thing, it's all continuous. So I mean, obviously, perhaps Reginald would know
I mean, yes, of course they
anyway,
have marrow.
cross-section here.
Yeah, the heavy and fill. Yeah, they do have marrow. Yes, they do indeed have marrow.
Before we get too far gone,
Does it fill up the gap? So
Ty,
you're
the
not
link I
by
put in
the
there,
air?
And other interstitial fluids as well.
cross-section of penguin bone.
That's so awesome. I just love the way the world works. I wish I could see a cross-section of a penguin bone 5 minutes later. Oh, here you go. I just love the internet. Okay, well, we got to back up step then to how do birds, because this is something I've actually never known, was that, so if you know the function of bone marrow, it's not merely filler inside the human body, for example. We're using that stuff, right? So I've never known, like when I learned this thing about how birds actually have airflow through their bones, I've never known how the heck do they go through the same sort of thing, like
Hogtie, just before we deal with that, somebody's asked me to read out what they've written above, and before it disappears from the chat, Hogtie Champ, Jade West, that shows that penguins control their air intake before they dive to save energy. When deep diving, they take in a lot of air for quick passive ascent. I'm not sure that's on point, but anyway, I read it out anyway. I don't know whether you thought it was relevant, but there we go, Nestling. I did it for
Nestling
you.
said that, did he? Oh, he usually says something intelligent, but I didn't understand a single word that was said there.
Yeah, I did as well. I was a little, I mean, obviously I was aware of that. I mean, they certainly do take in air. I've actually never known how far penguins dive. I mean, there are issues with whale bodies because they go down to such great depth that there gets to be a point too that okay, one of the problems that anybody's done scuba diving would know this, that if you are buoyant at a particular, so you've got a big air bottle with you, let's say you're clutching this big plastic air bottle, and it's keeping you buoyant. Well, if you can force yourself to dive down, eventually the pressure is going to compress that air bottle. It's going to crinkle in on itself, and now you have a lower volume of air. It's still the same number of moles of air that you've got in there, but now it's crushed down and it's more dense. You actually have less buoyancy. And there's a point where you're neutrally buoyant, and then below that point, you're actually negatively buoyant. It's possible when you're breath hold diving that you get to a point where you start to then all of a sudden sink, and if you go unconscious at a very low depth, you don't float back up. So anyway, I didn't know how that worked, but yeah. Then the other question we had was about I know when birds are full of red blood, they must be making red blood cells. There must be some osteogenic process that's going on so that their bones are growing in length. And I've never known how that works for birds. How dumb am I? So you got those two things in front of you.
I've never understood how birds' air sacs work.
Can dive to 1,850 feet and stay at depth for 20 minutes.
That's insane. How do they not just get crushed? Well, I guess they don't have hollow bones.
I don't understand how birds' air sacs works. Given the fact they seem to work much better than lungs, and they don't have to expand and compress them, they seem to be more efficient. Why haven't we got air sacs? I want to know.
Intelligent
a lot more
design,
useful than
Rumpus.
bloody
Intelligent
lungs.
design. Enough said.
Oh, right, thanks. Because
Why
I mean,
do
obviously
wombats have
they're
square poop?
well, the metabolism of birds, because they have to do a lot more work all the time, I think has to be rather great. Their air. I think I'm correct in saying their use of air, they use more oxygen than we do because they have to work so much harder, so they need better lungs or equivalent thereof, and therefore they have these air sac things, but that actually requires more flow. You need more. I don't understand how air sacs work anyway.
Well, again, Rumpus, according to Arcane Logos, birds fly by farting. They're like jet engines, okay?
Oh, that's what I would take it in, just spit out the back, of course. Yes, that gets the extra flow you need. Yeah, right.
Right. Has nothing to do with their flight feathers or their wings beating or anything. No, they just fart.
Put like this, that is one of the least stupid things that Arcane has said. I mean, that's how bad that guy is. I mean, the little computers, he believes the little computers inside DNA. I never forget that time he said, haven't you read about this, people? You know, the little computers inside DNA. He thinks the Earth is flat. I mean, oh God, there's got a whole series of things. He can dig further down than you think possible in the barrel. I think, Jesus, how much further down can he go? And he finds something new every time. It's just amazing.
It is remarkable. Actually, let's step back for a second and try to keep rein over our topic here. I do want to kind of wrap things up in, let's say, 12 minutes. If anybody else wants to host a hangout, we'll certainly make sure that the link gets out to other people here and the audience, so that the audience can kind of gracefully move over. I just want to randomly pick one here from the. So G consciousness, spoken gentlemanly in conversation. I don't. There's so many things he says I don't agree with, but here's one he puts in a comment in our live chat. Says a mind created the universe, and you know what? Let's say I don't have a problem with that. I mean, this is one of the things I've wanted to say, or I guess I have been saying for a while, about intelligent design, even about say biblical creationism. Like, if you want to look at the way that our universe functions, and you like, here we are telling you about common ancestry, the topic of the day being G-Man's debate with Dragnauct on is macroevolution science. So it's perfectly obvious that human beings and human civilization came to be because of some divergence and incredible specialization amongst the great apes, right? The chimpanzees went off and they're doing chimpanzee things. Humans have gone on and done human things, and we're pretty amazing group, some of the things we've done. We're not perfect, we do a lot of goofy things, but as far as being specialized apes go, you know what, we're cutting out our niche. So good for us. And if you want to say, well, how could this all come to be? How could human intellect come to be? How could compassion come to be? How could morals come to be? Well, obviously there's a God. Well, I see where you're coming from. I can't disprove that point. And I would just have to say, yeah, if there's a God, it's pretty amazing how this God was able to put this whole universe together and to create humanity through this process of specialization and speciation from common ancestry. Right? What I'm getting at here is these people who come in and say, well, if you're arguing in favor of common ancestry amongst the apes or common ancestry amongst all living creatures, you therefore must be denying God. That's not the case at all. If you think that it's amazing that humanity got here, well, then be amazed at how humanity has gotten to be here through the process of evolution from a set of common ancestors, because that's what happened, according to the evidence.
Does G-Man and Trimperism, I know he goes on about intelligent design, I know he goes on about the turbines and things. I'm not quite sure, though, what involvement do you think God has got in the design of biochemistry and people and species? Does he believe that he's taking an active role and saying, oh, we'll have a new species here and a new species there, a new turbine there, a new piece of the nucleolus or something inside that particular cell and that particular ATPs? Yeah, because he believes ATP, he goes on about ATP synthase, so presumably he thinks God took a special interest in that, but all the other things that revolve around that, or has God actively created everything? I haven't quite worked out the level of the interference that God's got in the physical processes and laws that he set up, which obviously we believe can we do anything without any interference. I'll have to find out. But
well, I can give you my answer because it's short, and I'm just not really that committed to it or interested in it. And that is, I think if you're going to believe in a God, sort of an omnimax God, I think part of what you have to integrate into your thinking is that there is nothing that is beyond this God's control, right? So don't.
I think that's different than whether he actually does it, though. That's what he can do and what he actually does.
That's what I'm getting at, and then I would completely leave it open to believers telling me that they have a different view. But I want to distinguish this from, I mean, things that, like, let's say I build a drone. You can buy these drone kits, and you can program them to do certain things. And it gets to be a point where I've planned out how this thing's going to work, and I've very carefully put everything all together. But there's a point where I release it, and I don't directly control it. Or maybe I have a little radio control thing, and I'm kind of generally moving it around. But as far as all the little micro decisions about the way the propellers spin, that's kind of up to the natural processes. When I say natural, I mean of its nature, the processes of its nature that sort of help it turn the torque on, change the torque on the different rotors and that sort of thing. But that's because I'm a human being. I have limited ability. The only sense of God, the only envisioning of an omnimax God that makes any sense to me at all is one that is so deeply intertwined in the universe that the spin of every subatomic particle is just part of his character. Every orbit, every move from one shell to another is something that is part of God's will. I can't envision a God that makes a universe and sort of just lets it go. But then hangs around and listens to our stupid prayers.
Doing something. You mean it's not just they set the physical laws in motion. You're saying he's actually saying this electron go from here to here. He's worrying about that particular electron and what it's up to.
Yeah, he can't set this sort of a God that kind of makes sense to me is not one that can set the physical laws in motion and then let things happen. He is the physical laws. The God's very character is the thing that makes the universe what it is and makes it function. Without it, it wouldn't be there. Because, as I say, the one type of God that doesn't make sense to me is one that is sort of there, like the way you raise your children, where you sort of pay a lot of attention to them when they're young and then you wander away. Then when they come to you for advice, you can give them advice, and sometimes you got to scold them, and then you wander away. That's the type of God that doesn't make sense to me, is one that sort of creates these physical laws and then lets the universe operate on its nature, not on his nature, but then still once in a while listens to our prayers and helps us find our car keys. That's the thing that doesn't make sense to me. And the occasional safe by a pile of garbage.
Yeah, because I mean, certainly Trim Prism certainly seems to think that God's doing some very intricate things with ATP synthase and turbines and cellular features. So he certainly thinks it's getting down and dirty. But once you set that level of interference, then, as you say, is he then arguing that everything is being driven? I mean, Matt Slick is always going on about how nothing happens without God's intention. So presumably it's all directed by God if he's directing everything. Then, although he then obviously that contradicts having a free will and all that, but certainly he talks about God having, when I've seen him being asked questions about whether he thinks God is doing things, and he says yes, everything is involved with God. God's allowing everything to happen that happens. Yet obviously we have free will, which would suggest that he isn't. Idiot. But yes, so some of them certainly do believe the interference is at a very low level, and others don't, and presumably disagree with one another.
Well, I think one of the places where people get a bit tied up in this, and I mean, I've heard people saying that if you believe that, you know, God put the basic laws of physics in motion, and so everything then happens according to them, and he chose those laws, intending the outcome. He knew that the laws that he put in place would give this outcome, and they seem to think that that means that, oh well, you're a deist. No. I think it's more along the lines of when we look at ATP synthase and we look at what's happening with the protons on the proton gradient, God isn't shepherding every single hydrogen ion. We don't need God in every cell to move every single hydrogen ion through your ATP synthase. It happens.
So your level of your view then, Fiona, God set up the physical laws, and then you can go and talk to him with prayers and things. Is that the sort of level you got?
Yeah, because he interacts with the whole organism, as in man. You see, this is the thing. If you say, I am a Christian, I accept Jesus Christ, all the rest of it, how can someone say you're a deist? How can somebody even think that you're saying, oh, God has nothing to do with it now, he just stands back? That is completely...
Right. So your level is not... Sorry, so for me, I'm just a little confused about your position. So you think God set up the physical laws, he sent down Jesus to direct us on the moral side of things, and he responds to prayer and stuff like that, and occasionally interferes with, I don't know, events. Is that about the level of it?
Well, no, what I'm saying is, how can somebody say that because you are saying that God set the physical laws in motion, knowing what the outcome is going to be, intending that outcome, and you're also saying that he sent Christ, remember that second bit, how can they say that you're arguing for a non-interventionist God? He sent Christ if you're a Christian.
I'm concerned that I think Fiona's referred to a discussion that Rumpus might not have heard.
That's not a question I asked.
Yeah, so I think it is a little bit tomorrow. Chris,
I'm trying to make my point.
Yeah, and I'll help you along with that. So I mean, you hear as Fiona and I are discussing what would be the nature of that. Say the only vision of God that makes sense to me is one that is so intertwined. God can't be separate from those processes. I don't think that's what what I'm saying would not accurately capture Fiona's impression of how God works, and that's okay because it also doesn't capture my impression, given that I don't believe God exists anyway. It just has not made sense to me that God could sort of wind up a clock and yet sort of still interact with it afterwards. So Fiona and I have some differences in sort of what we would think God would be if real, and but
he can do anything like that. He could do both. He could have set the physical laws and decide to interfere as well.
Sure. But I think the issue, there's sort of another positions that's come into this, is that when Fiona and I discuss this, it's clear that I kind of can't wrap my head around the way she's envisioning this. When she talks about it with G-Man, for example, he hears that little phrase in there about how God steps back and lets the natural processes go. So when we say natural, in that sense, we mean the nature of the universe. The universe is a thing. It's that has nature, certain properties, such as things like gravity, right? Such as a progression of time. These are the speed of light. These are things that the universe has, and the universe can achieve a lot on its own out of its nature. That is nature that's granted to it by God, if I understand Fiona's position correctly. But as soon as G-Man hears her say this, that there are things that God can achieve by letting the universe proceed under its nature, under his direction, of course, G-Man then says, well, you're being a deist. And what is so incredibly bizarre about that is that we're talking about a very subtle question, like your question you're asking, Rumpus, is very, very subtle about exactly how much involvement God has in the sort of micromanagement process. But the distinction between a theist and a deist is not at all subtle. Very, very simple question. Do you have a relationship, a personal relationship with the creator of the universe? Rumpus, do you have a personal relationship with the creator of the universe?
No.
Okay, then you're either an atheist or a deist. Fiona, do you have a relationship with the creator of the universe?
Yes.
Boom, theist. Not a hard question, not a hard distinction to make.
Bingo. And that's what I'm saying. If you say that you're a Christian and you say that you accept Christ, then there is no way anybody can describe you as a deist, because there is no way that they can say you're making an argument for a non-interventionist God. He's intervened in the biggest way he could. This is what I really don't get. It's as if there's this mindset that unless God's shepherding every hydrogen ion, then you must be a deist.
I still haven't quite worked out how much shepherding he's doing in your view.
Well, he's put these basic laws of physics in place, and that's what's causing things to do what they do.
Okay, that bit we've established.
Right?
You think he brought the laws of physics, but I'm wondering what other interference you think he's doing. So he talks to people, he responds to prayers, and he brought down Jesus to set down some morals. Is that about it?
No. As Hogtie just asked me, do I have a personal relationship? Yes.
Okay, I mentioned a bit of answering prayers.
There's more to it than just...
Right, that's the bit I'm trying to find. You haven't answered any. I keep on repeating these things. You keep on telling me the same thing back again, and we're not getting anywhere.
No, you keep interrupting me, Rumpus.
Right.
What I said was that I believe I have a personal relationship with God.
Okay, so God does...
I can talk...
Right, so God does three things. He set up the laws of physics, he brought down Jesus, and you have a personal relationship with him. Is that it?
You want to pigeonhole everything. I say I have a personal relationship with him. I can talk to him. Sorry?
Go ahead.
I can talk to him. I can communicate with him. He is part of my life.
Okay, we've done that bit. Okay, so personal relationship with God. He set the laws of physics, and he brought down Jesus. Does he do anything else?
A diagram.
I need a diagram. There's the three things we established he does. I want to know what the fourth is. If there's a fourth thing.
I think at the frustration of both Fiona and Rumpus, I do think we got to move along. I was suggesting that this actually now would be about a good time to kind of wrap things up. I wonder if you guys could sort of agree with this. I think when you start to discuss the role of God in the universe, that to whatever extent there's micromanaging and how God would go about that process, I think that's sort of a pretty deep theological question. I don't know how the Bible would address it. I'm sure that two believers could sit down and just crack skulls over this issue for a very long time. And really, in my view,
it's a difficult question.
But don't you have to say at some point?
I don't know.
I don't know how.
Fine. You could just say I don't know. That'd be a perfectly acceptable answer.
Right. But I mean, where it sort of ties to the G-Man thing is that when G-Man won't have this discussion with Fiona because he really wants to get on how she's not a real Christian, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and doesn't really try to work with her in a sense of fellowship towards understanding some of the very opaque, I was going to use the word occult, but I know that would be misunderstood. I'll say hidden natures of God. I mean, these are questions that people argue over and they don't really get to answers to it. But no, G-Man, you have a discussion. He's more so looking for holes like, oh, well, she said that these things happen, through the physical laws. He goes, oh, well, then you're a deist. And again, setting aside the most critical issue about what theism is, especially Christian theism, and that is the recognition of the gift of salvation available through Christ's sacrifice. He's willing to set that aside. That's not an important issue. It doesn't matter that that's in Fiona's belief set because she believes this other thing about physics. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But I do think we should crack on to another topic. Was there any that had come up sort of from the debate? I asked earlier for people if you had things that you wanted to touch on. Were there any sort of hilarious moments or WTF moments or good points that were made that sort of bring us back to that topic? That I know I'd asked people to type in the side chat, and then I don't know if we had actually gotten to all of them. I know we'd gotten through my point which I do think would have to be a fuller discussion about this thing about what it means when somebody brings evidence and then you're actually addressing that evidence and not going and talking about other evidence that actually isn't used in support of the position.
Yeah, I'll say one thing about that.
And then
almost said rumpus. Hogtie. It's something I messaged Fiona in the side chat, and I don't know whether other people saw it some time ago. And debates. Format is not conducive to fact-finding. So perhaps we were all expecting too much factual content, but really provided any serious factual content. But I mean, it's one of the reasons why debating some issues, I think, is perhaps a waste of time.
Yeah, I think that's actually been one of the more common comments that's come up since the debate was even announced, and then since these two hangouts have gone on too, is that people are like, why are you guys even talking to G-Man? Why are you talking to G-Man? Actually, let me touch on that then. So,
that's a separate thing. I think talking to someone is perfectly acceptable, but putting it into some form of formal debate structure, you're not going to get the truth out of that. You might find out what somebody believes, but no more than that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you and I are piling one weird criticism on top of another, because yeah, I know what you mean. The formal debate isn't the way of seeking the truth. And then I would even add to that, what we're doing here is informal debates. I have to kind of admit, I chuckle when people start talking about, oh, we're going to do this through formal debate now. By doing a YouTube hangout, really, that's what you think a formal debate is, and you're going to show up with, you know, your PowerPoint slideshow and your links to satirical websites, and then I'm doing a search on YouTube. That's not what a formal debate is. I just think that people who say that, not that I object to it. I think sometimes it's good that we have some structure and people can actually talk for a time, and then they're asked to address points that are raised. You know, but yeah, I mean, all those points one on top of the other. I'm wondering though, Dee, you sound like you kind of wanted to shoulder in, but often your mic doesn't have enough gain to.
No, I'd muted myself because I'm doing something at the same time. It's a bit noisy. No, it's actually going back, so I don't. I think one of G-Man's main issues is that he initially found out she was a Catholic. That's
yeah.
So but we've moved on, so I don't mind that.
Yeah. No, and that's fine. Again, it's both sometimes your mic gain isn't loud enough that you can kind of shoulder in. And also, I think your personality gain isn't enough to where you, oh, Rumpus started talking, I better let him talk. Actually, it's more so it's hog tie, but yeah, no, that is something, I guess, the reason I don't necessarily want to go too deep into that topic is because we just talked about it so much, but it's certainly worth mentioning that this is one of the issues, that once one of the radical evangelical has pegged you as being in a different pigeonhole than they are, you're automatically an enemy. And G-Man will take after any atheist. G-Man will take after anyone, even a believer, who accepts common ancestry. G-Man will take after, people may have seen a couple of weeks ago when he just tore strips out of, he both had a very experienced pastor. There was a fellow that has a PhD in theology who was very well read on a lot of these topics that G-Man was talking about. And as soon as you say, G-Man, you're wrong about this, he takes it personally. He starts to wig out. I mean, I think Dragnauct did a really good job about staying. I guess let me say it this way: when I heard G-Man start to launch into the thing about Lucy's knee, my inclination, you know, as you listen to these debates, you start to kind of put yourself in the other guy's shoes, and I'm thinking, boy, if I'm Dragnauct, this is what I'm going to say next. And what I would have said next, Drag, I would have said, you see, G-Man, this is why people call you stupid. I'm not saying that you're stupid, but I'm saying things like what you just said, that's why they call you stupid. Because you can't even do the most basic minimal research, right? And it would have been so tempting to launch into a very harsh rumpus caliber criticism of G-Man's basic ability to separate fact from fiction. Right, and you didn't do that. I mean, sometimes in my frustration, I think you should have kind of jumped on some of the things when he would present a piece of evidence like that. You know, just say, well, look, that's ridiculous, or why aren't you addressing my evidence, right? But you know, I don't know. That's just kind of how I felt about it. I mean, I think that G-Man, once he sees that you're an enemy, he doesn't want to listen to your points anymore. And I appreciate it when we do get conversations with G-Man, or I wish it were possible with True Empiricism, where we can actually just talk about the ideas we have without people blowing up at each other. But
So there's a reason for that, actually. And trust me, anyone who's seen my channel knows that I can go on literally a 3-hour monologue calling someone stupid in various ways. But I said, well, this is an opportunity for me to show the duality that kind of exists within me, that I can do either or. And the temptation was there. Trust me, sir. Like when he brought up the satirical site, and I'm like, shoot me in the dick now. I just see it on my face that I can't believe he did this. And I'm just, I can't give in to that urge, because one of his biggest complaints, and I mean, he's been saying this for the last few weeks, is that all people do is call me stupid. No one wants to sit and give me a chance or try and teach me. So I said, I will take that as a sign that I need to alter my approach here, not give in, and just kind of stick to what I can to refute what he's saying, no matter how just blatantly wrong that it is.
Can I make that our last topic, as then because then it sort of brings us back around again. I don't want to. I think many of us have been very, very successful lately in avoiding a couple of topics that much of the audience has criticized us in talking about. Why are we still talking about DNA and water, right? And I get people's point, but the thing is, these guys, they sort of pick their hill to die on, and they just simply can't move on past it. And this DNA and water thing, I mean, true empiricism is still wrong about that. And now he just added, what was his newest thing? Just real quick, somebody remind me, his newest thing that he's just insisting is the case, and it's just so goofy that you're like, wow, this is going to be...
Chromosome 2, is he back on that, isn't he?
Was it that one? And I know he talks about...
Yeah, he's gone back onto that.
Translocations and stuff. There was one specific point, maybe it was that one, about the telomere fusions always cause cancer, whatever he's on about. But anyway, we do try to say, okay, the point's been made when it comes to talking to these guys, that sometimes we sort of highlight like how they're just sort of have these bad mechanisms for separating fact from fiction, and they're critically victims of their confirmation bias. Everybody has confirmation bias, but most of us try to shed it, whereas they're critically victims of it. But I'm sure losing my point here. It was about G-Man's. Oh, about that. That was it. I had wanted to make the point in the last little while, kind of giving you some advice on this, Drag, but I think you knew it already. This debate wasn't going to be about macroevolution. It wasn't going to be about the nature of science. It wasn't going to be about the truth of about common ancestry. This debate for G-Man was about people are mistaken in their beliefs when they say G-Man is stupid. Because how many times in the last 2 weeks has he put a camera in front of his face and he said, oh, I know people, G-Man's stupid, and people shouldn't say that. And he'll say, the one thing that really you'll say what you want about me, but the one thing that really bothers me is when people say G-Man is stupid. So why don't we wrap up sort of on that point about the people saying G-Man is stupid? Is this a helpful observation? Is it at least technically correct? I don't know what.
Counterpoint, hog tie. G-Man did make a video of himself in the park picking up baby skunks.
I could say a lot of the stuff that he says. If anybody else said it, I'd say it's stupid. Like if it doesn't have to be G-Man, but there are certain things that he says that are just absolutely wrong in context, just by the word usage, by everything and any conceivable. It's fractally wrong, and it's so wrong to the point that you have to wonder how it passed like the sniff test. And once you know a little bit more about G-Man, you know that he really doesn't have a litmus test to figuring out whether or not something is just so far-fetched that he's going to accept it. But he will then claim that, well, this proposition from this group of people is so far-fetched that they shouldn't. So you know he has a criteria, but you're trying to figure out, like, how does he apply it? And that's the strangest thing. So then you go, okay, let me employ the Socratic method to find out how he's employing this and what are the attributes for it. And then, here's the best part, you find out that he selectively applies it, and it's not across the board. So you then say, okay, G-Man, I noticed this. Can you give me a justification? And he can't. And so rather than explaining to you why there is no justification, he will simply insist that you too do the same exact thing, so he is then justified.
Yeah. Well, and sorry, thanks to Nestle, who reminds me that it was ATP synthase was the new hill to die on. A very, very simple throwaway comment that True Empiricism had said. It was really of no import, no big deal. But just the double down, it's kind of gotten out of hand. But You know, it's something we can just move past if we just start talking about something else. But he's got to go on the attack, and everybody else is a liar, and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Just the thing with G-Man and his the eating grass thing was also another interesting point, where just to show. Okay, so G-Man, this is my view on what happened. G-Man actually thought that eating grass was poisonous, that there was some bad fate that would befall you.
He called it a toxin. He didn't know what toxin. He just said grass is toxic. So I went live and I ate grass.
Sure. But before he did that, so remember sort of the order of events, he says, oh, well, eating grass, and he picked up some grass, this kind of grass, and he actually said that grass. He's holding grass in his hand. He's talking about, oh, well, when you're mowing your lawn, don't eat that grass. He specifically was talking about the type of grass that you would have on a conventional lawn. And other people started saying, well, grasses aren't poisonous. Wheat is a type of grass, it's not poisonous. This kind of went around for a little while. Then later, when he comes back with the acknowledgement that none of the species within that clade of things we would call grasses, which of course includes wheat and others, are actually toxic in any way. He then says, oh, well, what I meant was, see, I wasn't talking about that grass. I was talking about some other plant. He started talking about poison ivy. I'm talking about some other completely different plant that's not even a grass. And the reason I was doing that, you see, this is what you do when you're clever like me. And he kept making this observation about how I think 10 steps ahead of everybody else. He starts talking about how smart he is, and he reinvents the entire story as if he wasn't talking about the grass he was literally holding in his hand when he was saying this thing. And he makes this whole point about, oh, well, this is what the evolutionists must believe, that because, when I say grass, well, I could be talking about poison ivy, or I could be talking about poison dart frogs, or whatever the fuck, like it just crazy.
This is the point where I think people, Jade, I could have tackled him a little bit by saying, look, we call grass this family of this clade here, and if you then go to diagram and say, look, all these things are grasses, and poison ivy isn't included in that clade, therefore that's not grass. Diagram would have sorted that one out.
Yeah. Well, the problem is, this is what I say too. I mean, I'm a victim of this too. When he says something or other people are talking to him, and I go, oh, I'm excited about this. I really would want him to learn this, even if he doesn't come to believe in evolution. He can hold his faith. That's great for him. But there are times he seems genuinely interested in learning, and I think, oh, when he says, oh, I know how I'd explain this to him, but then I have to kind of stop myself because I think, oh, that's right. He doesn't want to learn it. Any effort I put into trying to explain this to him is just going to be frustrating for me because he's going to just come up with these stupid phrases to get away from it. Like even with the grass thing, I mean, he had a simple mistaken belief, and he couldn't just simply say, oh, well, I didn't mean, I always thought, like I had an uncle who told me at one point, don't eat grass because it'll make you sick. I thought it meant it had some poison in it or some toxin. I don't know. I learned something new. Right? Instead, he has to come up with this whole elaborate, oh, well, what I meant was this, what I meant was that. And he just reminds me of that kid that, like, falls down in front of other kids and then gets up and dusts himself off and goes, oh, I meant to do that, right? Like that's, you know what I mean? Like that's just sort of his intellectual approach to these things, right?
Well, did you hear the justification?
We just don't have the right digestive system for grass. You can eat it, but you're not going to get anything out of it. We're not cows. We have one stomach.
No, that's not the reason. It's the enzymes. But we had a whole discussion about this. Jade was there. We talked about
I didn't know you'd
put it through a blender. Yeah, run lawn grass through a blender, and you can drink it. You'll be fine.
Yeah, it has something to do with the enzymes. It's just why some of us are also lactose intolerant. We don't have galactase or something. Yeah, some enzymes to break down that particular sugar. So
okay, yeah, but this is a little bit worse because it's actually the cellulose. So the cellulose actually it's a polymer. There's lots of subunits. And by the way, if you take those subunits, you turn every other one of them backwards, you actually get an even more rigid structure known as chitin. It's the crunchy bits on a lobster, which is why you don't eat lobster by crunching it or beetles. You got to take all that stuff off because your body can't digest it at all. And if you eat beetles, whole beetles or lobster shells or whatever, it's tough sledding on the can the next day. So you want to avoid that. The same thing for cellulose. Your body can't break it down. There are lots of animals that can break it down. If you eat grass, the cellulose comes out just the way it went in. So it's not that healthy. But if you run it through a blender, well then your body, the non-broken up bits of cellulose will still pass through, but your body can actually take in some of the nutrients from the grass. Not that there's a lot of nutrients in the blades of grass. This is not a really bizarre, or I would find even a terribly interesting thing. Slightly different than the lactase issue, because again, you're actually talking about physical roughage is the difference. But and the thing with the lactase, the other problem with lactase is because there are bacteria in your gut that will very vigorously take up the cause. If you let If you let the milk products proceed through to your intestine undigested from yourself, there are lots of bacteria that will very vigorously take up that cause, and they tend to produce a lot of waste products and waste gases, which you might be familiar with if you didn't take your Beano or your Lactase. What's that? The little pills you take before?
You've been talking to Mrs. Dragnauct.
No, I just know the story. There's actually a class. There's a class you could take on this, by the way. So I don't remember what year it's in, but I remember this professor talking about there's another one, oligosaccharides. So you find it a lot in beans and cabbage. I think there's a bit in broccoli. So if you think of like short chain sugars and then these long chain starches, there's sort of medium length chains. That's why oligo meaning short or small group. So the oligosaccharides are like starches, but like tiny little fragments of starches, not long enough polymers to be considered starches. They tend to not be well digested by people's bodies, but there are bacteria who just love it, and they produce a lot of gas. And somebody had this idea, and they actually got a peer-reviewed publication out of this. They made a milkshake that was rich in oligosaccharides, and then they measured the volume of flatus that the research subjects would produce. And I remember as this professor was reading this peer-reviewed research article out, he would pause to make these little observations. Like he'd be reading right straight from the text of it, and then he would say, "Oh, and I know what you're all thinking. The answer is a very complex system of tubings, valves, and balloons." And you go back to reading the thing, and then he says one of the subjects had produced 14.3 steers. A steer, S-T-E-R-E, is a cubic meter. Just picture cubic yard, but then a little bit bigger. 14.3 cubic steers of flatus. Oh, and there's a footnote here. Recognition being sought from the Guinness Book of World Records. 14.3 steers of flatus in one day. Done in the laboratory.
Blimey.
Wow.
Have we wandered off topic somehow?
A little bit. He-Man's explanation was that since, and I'll say we, those of us who use somewhat technical language and somewhat, I guess, well, I should just say jargon. Some of us who use jargon, we are tricky, and it's his words, tricky with our language. So because we are tricky with our language, he gets to be tricky with his language, and that whole demonstration about pointing to the grass and saying that it's poison was his attempt to, I guess, parody what we do to him.
Yeah, he's been trotting out that excuse a lot lately. I've heard him say recently too about, oh, well, I don't have to use the words the way the words do, because to you guys, everything's subjective. Definitions are subjective. So I don't have to. I can make up my own definition. Okay, but why?
Well, the other thing is, so long as he tells us what his definition is, otherwise we're going to assume he means the standard dictionary definition. I mean, I agree. Why make words up in? Why make the meaning up in the first place? But even if you're going to do that, you could at least explain to people what you think it means, so they know what you're actually talking about.
The quote that I was looking for much earlier on actually came from Humpty Dumpty, and it's when I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. And in a way, that sort of like sums up G-Man, doesn't it? But I was away from the computer, so I don't know whether you concluded the conversation that you started, Hogtie, but you asked whether he was or not. I would say you kind of got to explain, is there a difference between stupid, unintelligent, or uneducated? Because I think that I would certainly be confident to say he's uneducated. I'm not sure I would say that he was stupid.
Well, he did recently make the claim. Actually, it was a little more than a week ago. He said he didn't have a degree in nutrition, and then a video he'd put up this last Monday says he does have a degree in nutrition. So I want to extend congratulations for graduating from a bachelor's in science and nutrition on the weekend, G-Man. Now that you've announced earlier in the week here that you do in fact have a degree. He's not an uneducated person. He does say he does have a degree in nutrition. Congratulations. Sorry, what were the options? It was uneducated, stupid, and just merely ignorant?
Stupid, ignorant, or poorly educated.
I gotta say, I struggle with the word ignorant. I don't like when people use that word in the sense of like, well, you just simply didn't know something. I mean, you have to be very, very careful when you say, Reggie points out here, field ignorance.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things that, like I said, I've never taken apart a penguin. So I don't know what the heck's inside a penguin. So I don't mind admitting ignorance to that. But like when you say to people, like people might remember when True Empiricism called up, or was it G-Man? It called up, it was G-Man called up Aaron at 11:30 at night and was on his case, and then True Empiricism called
Dillahunty.
No, it was Aaron first. On that same
Okay.
evening, I think he called Aaron first, and then later called Matt, or I may have the order backwards, but he called the two of them on the same night there. And when he talked to Aaron took the call, and then partway through, and he was answering their questions, and then partway through, True Empiricism called him ignorant. So Aaron just shut down. He wouldn't listen to the rest of what they're saying. He's like, well, look, I got stuff to do. Forget it. You guys are going to be that way. Goodbye. And he hung up on him. And of course, True Empiricism criticizes Aaron for running away from the conversation and being afraid, and he knew he was beaten and blah, blah, blah. When, you know, True Empiricism makes no acknowledgement whatsoever about what he did, about what his role was in that in destroying that conversation. I think you got to be careful when you use the word ignorant. So I mean, technically, yes, I think G-Man is ignorant of a lot of things, but then so are the rest of us. Certainly, he's uneducated. I mean, he claims to have this degree in nutrition. I don't think that's the case, because this is at the same time he says grasses are poisonous. And what was his other thing? Americans don't get enough nutrients. The processed food, they're just apparently American food is just simply doesn't have enough nutrients in it, and that's why. I don't know, whatever you have all those health problems.
All my nutrients. I don't care what you say.
Drag, do you absorb your nutrients through your penis?
Maybe.
Don't get on the penis thing again.
Oh, I remember that. No, I remember that. Kevin G said that.
Yeah, that was a different guy. Let's not. Yeah, that was a
I
different guy.
remember that. I thought it was just a
Sorry, Hog Tie, but it does tie into ignorance.
It does. It does.
We sat there for about an hour and a half with that guy talking to him, and he just wouldn't let go of this stupid thing.
Yeah, I got to ask if anybody else is going to be running a hangout soon.
Sorry, I was just say, I wonder if you thought
administrative note. It's somebody, if you please send up a hangout soon. I'm looking at the clock. I do have to get to work. Today's actually work day for me. I can schedule it as I see fit, but I'm just going to be tempted to hang around and laugh with you guys for a while. If anybody's setting up a hangout, please let me know. We'll get the link out there for other people. And D, yes, please. What you got?
Yeah, I was going to say perhaps G-Man was confusing nutrients with actual. I mean, a lot of fast food and that doesn't have anything particularly beneficial. I had the word in my head and it's gone now. It's a lot of empty calories, and there are people who eat a lot of fast food and who, the word's gone completely now, but that they don't have a good diet. What's the word? They are malnourished, even though they're eating a lot of food.
Right, malnourished doesn't mean undernourished, and you know what? I mean,
no, that's what I'm saying. I wonder if that's where his confusion came from.
Right. I would never have a problem with that, and that's one thing we shouldn't. Let's scold ourselves a little bit here. I don't think we should be criticizing people for saying any one of those things. I call them, you know what I mean, isms, right? I mean, when somebody says that they're just like the fast food is not very nutritious, I get what that means. I mean, obviously there's a lot of nutrients in fast food, and that's the harm that comes from them, because there are a lot of very specific nutrients, things that you don't need more of. So I know what somebody means. They're not nutritious. Or when somebody uses the word malnourished to only mean undernourished. There's many ways you can be malnourished by being overnourished with particular nutrients and ignoring others. But somebody who in the same breath is saying, I have a degree in nutrition, but then turn around and make some really basic mistakes like that. That's the thing that makes it funny. I mean, it's the same thing with True Empiricism and his, you know, where he just can't, he can't just make a simple mistake and then move on from it, but he's got to go through and he does the stuff that he does. Let's not dwell on it.
I
somebody
think
open up a hangout, please.
Someone was saying that I think I was reading or something that we used to have something like 10. Historically, we've had 10 times more roughage or something than we have now, and so the ratio now we have, our digestive system is completely unused to this mix that we're feeding it at the moment, and so of course it gets very upset about it all. If we have 10 times more roughagey things, raw carrots or whatever, or grass even, the poor old body is just not used to having all this concentrated stuff and not having to digest and spend all its life banging away at roughage. And of course it also dilutes in effect some toxins and things. It has all sorts of other effects, having basically stuff you can't digest and we don't eat anymore. We've eliminated that from our diet just about, and of course our bodies don't like it. So eat more roughage. The poor body doesn't not used to what we're doing.
Actually, if you listen to G-Man talk about his actual health advice, I say this of both of G-Man and Tommy Hall, to a large, less so about Tommy Hall, to a large extent, they have some good thoughts on health advice. and it is true. I mean, the things that we do to ourselves, you know, with the smoking and the alcohol, the complete lack of interest in getting any sort of exercise. You know, like Tommy Hall says, people say, oh, I go for a walk. You got to get your heart rate up. You got to really enjoy, not just work your body, enjoy
I've got a great
your
stat.
body.
Sorry to interrupt. I've got a great stat for that. Around World War II and in Britain, I think something like the average calorific requirement was something like 4,000 or 5,000 calories, and now it's down to 2. And wherever you look at people from World War II films or World War One stuff, they're all incredibly thin, certainly in comparison to bloody bloated Americans. But even the Brits now, on average, and even in Europe. And so you could just compare the shape, and you can see that our lifestyle has changed horribly. And of course, in America, you've got this diabetes outbreak because you're also stuffing yourselves with cheeseburgers all the time.
Also, after the war, when we had rationing, I'm not that old, I hasten to add, not when I say that. When there was rationing, we had one of the healthiest diets we've ever had here.
Absolutely right, Dee. In fact, I think they were saying under rationing in Britain, during time of rationing, we were more healthy than we've ever been before or since.
Especially because the sugar was one of the things that was highly rationed, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just because someone has set out here's the diet we believe we should have, and maybe they didn't overeat, and it was balanced, and that we were the best nourished we've ever been in this time of austerity. It's quite incredible, really.
I think we're going completely off topic here, though. I think one of the issues is, and I believe this is especially the case in parts of America, is that your crappy food and your fast food is cheaper than your roughage and your fresh vegetables and what have you.
I think a lot of it, because I mean, people have more disposable income, but I just read Tommy's in the chat. He says he just showed up right when and it literally, Tommy, I have not mentioned your name before this, and it had just come up. And actually, I was interrupted. I didn't even make the point, but about how, you know, there's good recommendation for people to get more exercise. I think that the thing we budget more carefully now is our time, because we want to be on YouTube, we want to do hangouts, we want to watch our what's it called? I'm going to embarrass myself. I forgot the name of the show now. I don't even watch this. I'm proud of the fact I don't watch it. The swords. No, yeah, for sure. But the thing with the swords, and the people. Yeah, Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Oh, Game of Thrones.
Like people, yeah, that we just the 20 years, the last or more, the culture is really focused on these sorts of consumer electronics type activities, you know, the internet and TV and things like that. That we need to have time for those things. So even when you have disposable income, you want to get something that's quick and easy and fast to cook, so you can get on and do these other things. Where, you know, back in the day when you were living in a cabin and you sort of did what you did, you know, you had to put a coal oil lamp on, you had time to make a meal and spend that time with your kids. And I think that big change in diet, and then of course the fact that we don't have to work hard physically, means that we just find fewer excuses to move our body once in a while. And you have to pick a time in the day where you're gonna say, I'm not gonna watch, I'll record a PVR Game of Thrones, and I'll get to a gym and I'm gonna work, or I'm gonna go outside and I'm gonna run, not just walk and look at stuff, but really get that heart rate up. So and I think, you know, that's one thing I do respect about G-Man and about Tommy. I think True Empiricism is also in that camp too, where he's really working on some health issues and doing it by saying, well, I'm not just going to take a bunch of these pills or I'm going to pray, but I'm going to actually work my body. I think that they've got some good ideas there. Unfortunately, it ends up spiraling off into some other crazy ideas, which maybe isn't the topic for this particular hangout.
But ironically,
didn't he famously want to have some junk food?
Ironically,
didn't he famously say sorry, Dee.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Ironically,
especially if the recent not psychological, what's the word I'm looking for? It's probably because I'm hungry now. Some of the studies have shown that, especially if you've got a stressful job, an excellent way to get unstressed is to come home and actually cook a meal, because it will distract you completely from all the crap that's in your head about your job, instead of just wanging something in the microwave and sitting in front of the telly.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, it gives you a bit of that time. Whereas if you're going to, say throw something in the microwave and shovel it down, and then sit there and watch TV, and you put all your brain power to passively listening and attending to some storyline that somebody else has put, or even joining hangouts and stuff, you really need that quiet time, your shower time, your sleeping time, and all that stuff. We're sort of wandering totally off topic here. Speaking of that, I do kind of have to press on and do some work. So I don't know if we have any other kind of wacky observations, or if maybe it's time. And again, a number of times I've asked if somebody else wants to start a hangout, let me know. We'll share the link around. But having not received that, I think I'm
I think. Well, I'm trying to see if Tommy wants to come talk. Reggie, do you have a little bit longer? Red.
Yeah, you know what, Drake? Okay, who's got decent moderation? You're not on a mobile device, are you, Drake?
No, I'm on my laptop. So Reggie has some time, so I'm going to open up a hangout, and we can continue to talk about well, some of the stuff that Tommy's trying to bring up, and some of the other. I want to get Reggie kind of caught up with some of the interesting things that we encounter here on G+, as he's not getting a lot of the references that we're making.
Okay, why don't we do that then? So I guess we'll give myself and the audience and everybody else a 10-minute break or so. By then you'll have yours running. Is that right, Drake?
Yeah.
Okay, and I will share through whatever means the link to watch Drake's thing. I mean, I had a lot of fun today, both watching the first hangout, watching the debate, and then Steve's hangout, and having this one. A lot of funny moments in it. And again, I kind of wish I could sort of hang around all day and dick around. CDPR again, who I don't get to see very often, and Rumpus. Always nice to come in with your thoughts, that sort of thing.
It's all nice to see you, Hogtie.
D and Drag and Pseudo and Reggie. Good to meet you, Reginald. Interesting observations. I cannot believe that I just opened a website to which I called what they call the Skull Emporium. I don't think that's what it was called.
Skeletons Unlimited. Yep.
Skeletons Unlimited. And it's sure enough, the guys Skulls are us to show up and do that.
And then I used to work for them. Yeah, kind of weird. Yeah.
That is a weird coincidence. And of course, Tommy Hall showing up exactly when the time comes. Well, I guess we'll see what happens in the future of debating in the so-called great debate community. I will, at some point during the day, go listen to what G-Man and True Empiricism had to say, sort of from their side of it. I wonder if I'm going to find myself surprised by their reaction to the overall fairness of the thing. But anyway, thanks to everybody. We're going to go off air. I'm going to leave this hangout open, obviously, for people to hang around and chit-chat before Drag gets his thing open. But other than that, audience and other folks, we'll see you over on Dragnaught's channel. Good night, everyone.
Night-night.
Thank you. Good night.
How sweet.